Welcome to the Sharpe Way Show. So happy to have you with me today. I know I'm a little bit late, a little bit past 2:30 p.m. on the East Coast, and this was something I did not prepare as well as I should have prepared for this, but I did do a good job. Well, we'll see if I did. You guys will help me because I did most of this. When I got up, I thought, okay, I got to do this history of the world thing. What's the spin? And I thought the spin has got to be why it matters. I could just yap about history for like 17 hours and mean nothing, and it'd be interesting, and some of you would like it, some of you would just vomit, but I would like you to at least think, okay, this matters. So I'm going to focus on things that matter. That was my whole goal, focusing on things that matter for us today. In addition, I had to find something else, which I did not think of until like an hour or two ago. I was like, oh, I should probably have some maps available. I don't just talk trash. I want to have some maps and stuff. So I had to find like 10 maps or something, so I could show you like how things happen, where things matter, things of that sort that I thought might be important for you guys. You could look at it and go, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. So I'm going to do this in a way. By the way, this is the why the history of humans matters to us today show. I should have probably said that off the bat, but that's what this one is, right? Why does world history affect us? How does it affect us today? That's what the show's about. It shouldn't be that long. I don't think, no more than like 9 hours. I'm kidding. It won't be that long. I'm kidding. But you guys also can add in. We'll go back and forth interesting things. The piece that I think matters the most is I'm going to kind of cover chunks of history versus specific dates, because I won't remember them all anyway. But so it'd be specific. So some of you who want to deal with specifics can let me know, hey, what about this specific thing? We'll chat about it if you care or not. I'll do that. And why it matters today. So you know it's going to be good. So do me a favor. You know what you should be doing? Clicking the button known as Lima, India, Kilo, Echo. Please do so. It does matter. Go ahead and do that. I appreciate that. Repost it if you can. I think the reposting part is great. Absolutely. Please do that if you can. All of these are going to be important. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, do so. Follow. You can super chat me during it. Go right to the top. Become a member. Helps me do more of this if at all possible. $4.99. You can hit the join button on YouTube with the Sharpe Way, Larry Sharpe, or become a member on Rumble. And while I'm live, click subscribe. Both of those are amazing. All right. The first thing I want to bring up, the first piece, if I could, is the idea of humans in general, right? First part, humans coming out of Africa. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Larry, that sounds amazing. They came out of Africa, whatever, who cares? Here's why that matters to us now. Is that not only did Homo sapiens come out of Africa, in fact, also who came or what came out of Africa were Neanderthals. And I got to remember how to pronounce it. I don't remember the name of this. Denisovans. I think that's what it's called. Denisovans. These are two types of humans that came aboard. Why does this matter? When they came out, Denisovans went to Asia and Neanderthals went to Europe. Why does that matter? This is the beginnings of different human races. That's why it matters. And they came out multiple times. Right? We didn't just come out once, we came out several times, usually because of either pressures in Africa or something like that, right? So now the humans who stayed in Africa, who just stayed there, and then those who came out, and those who came out into Europe. This goes back to our basics of understanding that humans aren't racist. What, Larry? Did you just bring racism up with the first humans? Yes, because this is a give or take, humans started coming out of Africa somewhere around 200,000 years ago, give or take in that area, right? About 75,000 years, we're all out. Why does this matter? Homo sapiens come out and go into Asia, and they meet the Denisovans. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, whatever. That group of other humans who are all gone. Did we just go there, find them, and kill them? No. Did we kill some of them? Of course, because we were killing each other also. We were tribal. We were fighting each other. But we also mated with them. We also joined with them. And they went away because, boy, the Homo sapiens like uniting. And I mean that in the most physical way possible. Homo sapiens love that. We're like, oh, we could do it with you too. Let's do it with everybody. We were happy to do that. And they went away. And how do we know this? Because many Asians still have that DNA in them. Neanderthals in Europe, same thing. We went to Europe and we were like, hey, we can get together. let's do this. And we did. So that's why some Europeans still have Neanderthal DNA in them. This is where that comes from. This is proof from thousands and hundreds of years ago that we are tribal, not race. These other humans were literally different races, literally different types of humans. We were like, be part of my tribe. We literally did that. Like, I wish it was a joke, but it's not. Let me, if I could, I will show you a quick map if I can. I think this is the one that's a good one. Yeah, there we go. This is a quick one showing how we came out, right? Multiple ways. Now, why else does this matter? The secondary piece of this matters is when we got to where we got to, right? Why does that matter? Because if you look at when we actually got into North America, if you can see my little cursor here, when we got as humans in North America, it was late. We didn't get here until 15,000 BC, give or take, or BCE, as they say. BCE stands for before the Common Era. So that's when you start seeing these people, us starting to go late. Why does that matter? Because then this entire area, the Americas, is now colonized by humans very late, right? We had been some type of hominid or something in Africa for like 3 million years, whatever it was, right? Then we come out and we start meeting other people, other humans, other animals, and that's what we're doing. But we went very late. This is going to come back. This is a critical piece is going to come back. Remember this in the future. This piece is going to matter a lot in the future. So let me grab some of this piece. When we go out there and do this, you say to yourself, okay, Larry, so why do I care why this happened? Well, the problem is when we head out there, we then start to have the point where now as we start to have problems surviving, we create small groups that are now distant from each other. What does that do? Evolution, specialized races, specialized everything, right? Changing in how our face features are, right? You live in the desert, you tend to have a larger nose because it's drier. You require a larger nose, longer nasal cavities. You live in more arid. You live in more moist areas, you tend to have a smaller nose, not required, things like that, right? You live in the steppes of Asia, you tend to have a single fold eye. All those types of things begin to happen as we go out and then begin to collapse. Meaning we grow and then have trouble surviving. All of a sudden now things change, right? Lighter skin in the area of Europe. Why? Vitamin D to bring vitamin B into our bodies, right? Darker skin in Africa, not required anymore, protecting you from the sun. You see the differences within humans start to happen around this time. That's when we start to do this, as we see things start to happen, right? All of a sudden you start seeing that start to happen, right? So that's the piece that I think is important. Chaz says that I'm wrong. He says, sorry, so the Americans have been populated this entire time. The Topper site, South Carolina, is 20,000 years old. Lucia, woman in Brazil, 20,000. I can go on. Well, that may be true. Whether it was the entire time or not, the issue is the North and South America was not the entire time. Maybe earlier than 50,000 years. That's possible. I'm not. The odds of us being completely accurate on the timeline are slim, right? Not very high. They're slim. But okay, 15, 20,000, 22,000. Okay. Still not 200,000. So later is the key piece that matters to us. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that will affect us in the next piece. Chaz goes on to say, dark-skinned humans are from every continent. I just won. Yes, that's what I just said. As they moved into places, generally speaking, you will find any type of creature, animal begin to shift and adjust based upon them being isolated. So yes, you have darker skinned people in Central America, South America. Of course, yes, that's not. Chaz, please, I'm not fighting you. But what I do not want you to do, and I don't know if you're doing that, please don't virtue signal on this, because I don't give a shit about virtue signaling. I care about how it affects us now. That's what I care about. Just be clear on that. I'm not saying you are doing that, but I'm also not saying you're wrong. Totally possible. And clearly with this one, yes, darker skinned humans are lighter skin are over also, right? You find lighter skinned humans in North America. You find darker skinned humans in South America, in Australia. You see them all over the place. Absolutely. Yes. Chat says no fight here, just clarifying. Yes, agreed. I think we're on the same page. Awesome. So I do think that part does see how we began to change, which is why, generally speaking, you see humans begin to adapt. Why does that matter? Again, as we adapt, we tried to say when we came around going, oh, these people are this way because they're different. No, they're this way because of what happened as they broke off and began to change and shift. That's all that happened. So yes, but why does that matter? Okay, it matters for several reasons, because the next piece that happens is that we find agriculture around 10,000 BCE, give or take, in that area, depending on where you are in the world, but in that area. Why does that matter? Again, it goes to the next piece. That happened later in the Americas. It still happened in the Americas. We still did it. But it happened later in the Americas than it did in certain areas outside of the Americas. And that's the difference. So when that began to happen, you found that it was a whole lot easier in general in the Eurasian continent to do with agriculture. Why? Because you had bigger and better pack animals. Yes, that was an issue. Pack animals, yes, that's the bigger, better issue, pack animals. Second piece, you have an issue to where the humans moved into the Americas, and the animals that were raised there for so long didn't understand how violent and aggressive the humans were. They didn't know it. So the humans basically killed them all. I'm not joking. Either through disease or through hunting. There used to be elephants in the Americas. We killed them all. There used to be horses. We killed them all. Well, there's horses now. Yes, the Europeans brought them back. The humans who moved into the Americas killed almost all the pack animals. Why does that matter? This is a critical piece. Pack animals being gone means, generally speaking, the wheel is not used in the same way. The wheel is used more as a almost as a gaming device, as a toy in a way, in other ways, for religious purposes, for cultural purposes, but it isn't used the same way it was in Eurasia, which was with pack animals. Once that happens, you see a massive change in technology, one which North America and South America never caught up on. So now the Europeans come and they are way behind. One of them, there are several reasons. One of those critical reasons is because of the lack of pack animals, which meant the lack of use of the wheel, which meant the lack of use of technology. Huge chunk. Same thing, by the way, with sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has a secondary piece, though, a lack of stone. At least you look at the Americas, tons of stone and wood. You can build things of stone, massive structures of stone. No worries, you can do that. Africa, hard to do. Challenging to build things out of stone in sub-Saharan Africa. Again, not Northern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. Very tough to do. So you see these are some of the reasons why these parts of the world, to this day, still struggle because they fell so far behind literally thousands of years ago. So you're going, Larry, is that real? It is real. It's absolutely true. You see a lot of problems with this, right? You see a lot of problems with this. There were just no ways of doing it. Yes. So Chaz was going to say, camels were found in America, mastodons. Yes, they were. They absolutely were in America. We killed them all. In fact, the last mastodon, if I remember the story, the last mastodon was actually still on the planet in like the 1800s, I think. I'm not joking. 1800s, recently, last 300 years. And it was on some island in like, Arctic Russia. Like they found, like, oh my God, if I found one that just died like 100 years ago or something like that. So yes, they were all over the place. That's absolutely true. So yeah. So in any case, I think that's a critical distinction that we have here. Kim goes on and says, it's evolution, humans evolved to darker skin or whatever, and it happened over thousands of years and thousands. Yes, correct. Yes. Phil says, I'm probably part Neanderthal. You might be. You can do, if you do a DNA test, many people who have European background do have Neanderthal DNA in them. Still true from that time frame. It does still exist. So you can still find it. All right. So let me keep going. I bring it up because you can see how it still affects today, right? It still does. In addition, if I can keep going, you now find something else interesting. Around 4,000 to 5,000 BC, again, depending upon where you are in the world, around that area, you find the first real cities and the first large cultures. But what's the critical distinction here? The critical distinction here is, why would that happen? Why would that happen? Right? Why would that happen? It would happen because, and this is the odd thing people don't recognize, flooding rivers. I'm not joking. Rivers that flood, large rivers that flood is where many people came. They would say, why would the flood matter? Generally speaking, again, when rivers flood, they bring up all the nutrients onto the ground and then it goes back together. So now we have agriculture with very, very fertile ground. One of the breadbasket of the ancient world was Egypt, the Nile, right? Floods brings all the goodies into the ground, goes back. You can plant everything in there from I don't know, cotton to wheat, to whatever. It was the breadbasket of the Middle East. Because of that, Egypt fed Rome. That's how much food it could make. That's why they became so huge, right? Not just that, the flooded plains in China. There's a difference between these two, though, right? And the thing I want to bring up here is once you get to this point in rice culture, that may sound odd, but rice culture versus wheat culture. Why is that a difference also? And you find it still to this day, you find it. Rice per square foot, per square mile, per square acre can support more people than wheat. Just can, but calorically wise, it can. So when we started having agriculture, we started growing all this stuff. Now, a couple things happened with agriculture. Number one, we started to have agriculture with both obviously food, but obviously vegetables, but also animals. So of course, what did that mean? More disease. Yes. Actually, and less active humans. Yep, not good too. And another piece is physically smaller humans. Humans got smaller. They physically got smaller. They went from like being, whatever, 6 foot or whatever they were. I don't know. They went down to being, 5 something, whatever. They became smaller. Why? Weren't eating as much protein, weren't as active. Physically, humans across the globe, once we started more agriculture, became smaller. Now, are you saying, Larry, people who didn't have as much agriculture were taller? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes. And many of those people were Scandinavian type people who up there just eating fish and stuff and don't have much agriculture. They were physically bigger. Yes. Higher protein intake, all those things tended to make them physically bigger. More dairy products, physically bigger. That's true. Now, does that really matter? I don't know. Unless you like tall guys or tall women, maybe it matters to you. But otherwise, it's an interesting piece that also happened. But so that happens. Rice culture can support more bodies, more physical people. With that being true, what wound up happening? You find more Eastern rice cultures actually being more communal. You have to be. You have more people packed in smaller spaces. You have larger cities in the East. Why? Because you could do that. You could put more people. In fact, for many parts of the world, to include Japan as an example, they used to use rice as currency. Literally, you would give bags of rice or amount of rice would be current. You'd pay your tax in rice, not gold or silver. Now, the Chinese were the center of that of East Asia when it came to culture as a general rule. Obvious exceptions, but in general they were. So when the Chinese created more coinage and money, people copied them. The Romans were for Europe, and either Persians and or Egyptians were for the Middle East and or North Africa. They were kind of the ones who kind of decided what you'd be doing. The rest of the people began to follow them. And that began to happen too, which again, look at why are so many languages, Eastern languages, pictographs or, not an alphabet. Why? Because of Chinese influence. That's the reason. The Chinese spent a lot of time working on this. But something else happened, which is interesting. The Yellow River in China actually floods and flooded often. So the Chinese had to figure out how to fix this. And one of their early leaders, I forgot the name of the leaders, one of their early leaders around the year 3000 or so, actually decided he's going to fix the rivers. I'm not joking. He travels up and down the river, right? And he figures out how to do this. He figures it out. And they go, this guy's great. He should be the king. He should be the leader. That's one of the reasons why they started. Again, not the only one, but one of the reasons. Why do you care about this? Because this is the origins of the merit system in China. This is the origins of the merit system. Prior to this system, most people became king or leader, whatever it is, because either they were just violent enough to just take it physically. They could just conquer people and take them. That was the most common way. Or people believed in some kind of divine power or divine God or something that said, you're the king, right? Usually that's how that worked. You're the king. Okay, because God said so, or you have a bigger army. But the Chinese went, no. You deserve to be king. Now you look at modern day China. Wow, was not, but that's still part of it. This is the beginnings and the origins conceptually and why it was accepted of Confucianism. Because that concept was we need to all be together and merit-based. Merit-based was important. Early China was all about merit-based, believe it or not. But merit-based then was all testing, right? That was the critical aspect. Could you do it? They actually believed in China, and it's the origins of this. This is 3,000, 5,000 years ago. The origins of the idea that you had to earn the right to rule, and that the mandate from heaven could go away. That if you weren't virtuous enough, this goes to Confucianism, all about virtue. If you aren't virtuous enough, you don't deserve to be king. No, you're not virtuous. The gods in heaven are mad, and they're going to take your mandate away. Too bad. This is why, to this day, you still see within Chinese culture an idea of renewal, repeat, reform, that kind of circular idea of it always works that way. You do something while you're virtuous, the gods reward you with power. And from that, you then move on. And then you screw around or mess up. The gods get mad at you. You try to reform yourself. Gods love you again. Then you just screw up too much and the gods hammer you and we reboot everything. That kind of cycle, Chinese is still in Chinese culture to this day. And it all began back then. That's why that matters. We didn't really have that in the Western part. And we actually didn't have that, believe it or not, also in the Americas. The Americans didn't have that either. The Americans were much more about, and Americas and Europe, we're much more about, no, I have a bigger army and God said so. So I'm the ruler and my family kind of basically forever. So that starts to happen around 4000 BC in certain places. Tigris River, Tigris Euphrates, Indus Valley, Yellow River, and Nile. These are the big ones that happened, right? Those are the big areas where it happened. It didn't happen as much in the Americas until later. It happened in the Americas, but it happened in the areas now, we think of Central America, Mexico. But again, it was a little bit later when that happened. The Olmecs were the first ones that I remember, if my history is right. Maybe Chaz will check me if he's paying attention. I'm pretty sure the Olmecs were the first, but they didn't really become a thing until about 1000 BCE. So they were about 2,000 to 3,000 years later. Why? Because again, they came over later, so they were slower because physically it came over later. And not just that, they came over later and they didn't have pack animals. Those two things were different, but I'll move on if I could. The next piece is around 3000 BCE. Why does that matter? Because that's really the rise of the first actual empire. And why does that matter? Because before that, a king was kind of a king of a small area, maybe a couple of villages, one city. It wasn't a huge thing. But around 3000, give or take, in that area, that's when the Sumerians created an actual empire. They conquer other countries, right? The definition of a country is one with a king, and then an emperor or an empire is multiple countries. That happens in the year 3000. And they have a city of like 50,000 people. I mean, it's insane. Now, of course, that's like a small city in America. It's like a large town in America. But then 50,000 people, I mean, that was massive. Massive armies. Like if you had like one of the biggest armies in the world was like, I don't know, 2,000 people. Like 3,000 people was a massive army. Oh my God, right? In the year 3000, 4000 BCE. Now that changed very quickly. By the time you get to the 400, 500 BCE in that area, now we're talking tens of thousands, maybe even massive armies, 100,000, maybe, right? Maybe. Now we have armies of millions. But then you had 3,000, 4,000 people. You could like conquer people with that. That was a lot of people to have. So in any case, 3,000 people was huge. So we move away from that into around 2000 BCE. And what happens there, which is critical in several areas, 2000 BCE, in my opinion, is a big chunk for a lot of reasons. Number one, Hammurabi. And I'm going around. It's not exactly. It's around 2000 BCE. I don't want to. I would never remember every date anyway. So that's why I'm doing generics. I'm sure some of you can correct me if I'm incorrect. Although if you want to specify the date, around 2000 BCE, Hammurabi creates his code of laws. Hammurabi is Babylonian. He creates the code of laws. It is the origin of written law. Isn't that crazy? It's the origin of written law. All of a sudden now we're talking about, it's not, I just don't say whatever I say because I'm the king or I'm the emperor. I am still the king and emperor, but there's laws. And we should all follow the laws. And they were posted so everyone could read them. Now, obviously, people were illiterate, but still they were posted. So if you could read, you were lucky enough, you could actually read the laws. The laws are there. Imagine if we could post our laws and people could just read our laws. We don't. You can't read our laws. There's too many of them. But it was a big obelisk and you could read the laws. This is the origins of an eye for an eye. This comes from Hammurabi. This concept is a massive concept. Joe says the first authoritarian. No, there were a lot before him. A lot. This is the first authoritarian who actually gave himself some rules. There were lots of authoritarians before him. All the ones before him were all authoritarians. In fact, he actually gave himself some rules, which other authoritarians kind of didn't do. So as far as authoritarians go for that time period, he was a pretty good authoritarian as authoritarians go. So if you had to live under an authoritarian, Joe, at that world, you'd probably rather live underneath him if you had to live under one. So yes, that happens. But it's a second piece throughout the world, and that is the rise of the Greek city-states. 2,000 years ago, the city-states began to rise. Why does that matter? This matters to us because this is the beginnings of the concepts of democracy. This is when they start talking about democracy. Now, Greek democracy wasn't the same as our democracy. Greek democracy had lots of problems, and Plato was during that time frame, and Plato didn't even like democracy. He thought democracy was stupid. He was like, "This is dumb. We need to have philosopher kings. That's what we need. We need benevolent dictators." This is what Plato thought, right? In his idea of the republic and stuff. He saw democracy at work. He's like, "This is bad. I don't want this." So obviously didn't go very far. But the concepts of democracy began here that we have to this day, right? This is a critical piece. Without the Greeks talking about democracy then, we don't have it now, or at least not the way we have it now. At least this was a very important piece. But I want to keep going. This was also the beginnings of colonization. Colonization, yes. The Greek city-states weren't nations yet. They were literally city-states. So how does a city-state survive? You have massive cities, and you need to bring in things like food and water and all these things, right? How do you do that? Well, you create colonies. And the Greek city-states created tons of colonies throughout the Mediterranean. So colonies, not actual city-states, but little areas that popped up the place where you could Hellenize or Greekify it. You could Greekify it and then have them trade with you back and forth. Created colonies. One of those colonies, by the way, would eventually become Rome. Boy, was that a mistake for the Greeks. But yes, one of those colonies would eventually become Rome. So they created colonies. So the origin of colonialism begins in 2000 BC. I know it sounds crazy, but it does. Not just around the same time this is happening, around the same time the rise of the Greek city-states, the same time Hammurabi is creating the legal codes. In Giza, Egypt, they are actually building the pyramids. Almost happened at the same time. Crazy. And at the same time in China, the Yellow River, they are building up a large country in China now. All this is happening around the same time frame, right? All around the same time frame. So Phil says like Syracuse. Correct. Syracuse, 100%. Yes. Syracuse was one of the biggest ones. And later on, the Carthaginians will fight over it. They'll all fight over Syracuse. Everybody want a piece of that. 100%. Not just that, the Muslim empires will fight over Syracuse. Everybody wanted Syracuse. You are correct. It was an amazing piece there. Sam says, to be fair, I don't want to be ruled by idiots either. Pure democracy sucks. I think that I think that most people would agree with you on that one. So a lot of people would. A lot of libertarians for sure would. That is true. A lot of libertarians would. I'm going to give you a quick, if I could. Hold on. Hold on. I want to get one more map if I could. One more map. All right. Hold on. There it is. Okay, that's the one I'm going to show you. Let me show you this one more map if I could. This is a map. Yeah, this is a map of the world in 2000. In 2000, 2000 BCE. So you can see that. You can see this is the area where Rome isn't here yet. The Greeks are here. The Egyptian Empire is here. The Chinese are here. The Indus Empire is here too. So you see these empires being here right now, right? So that's what the world can look like. And up here, as I told you before, as you remember my show, this is a migratory pattern up north, migratory pattern up north, which is why the Koreans, the northern, I guess, Siberians, the Finns, and the Hungarians are all related. Their language is related, and they are physically related genetically. They're related as the migratory patterns came over in this area. Actually happened. So that's why the Huns are different, and their language is different than other European languages. They're not Germanic language, not Slavic language. Hungarian is different language related to Finn. Finns do not speak a Germanic language like Scandinavians. They all speak a Germanic language. The Finns don't. The Russians speak a Slavic language, not a Finnish language, different language. It's related to Korean, which is related to Japanese. Now, some of you may not know this, but at this point in time, if I can show this part, when I go over to the east area, you look over here, you will see two different colors in Japan. If you can see that, two different colors in Japan. Why? The modern day Japanese are not native to Japan. What? Yes, they killed their indigenous people too. See, we all do that. If you look at the north area, you'll see something, and if you can read it, I don't know if you can, it says Ainu on it. The Ainu are basically native Japanese. Like we have Native Americans, they have native Japanese called the Ainu. They still exist in northern parts, the large island called Hokkaido. This area is Jomon, which is the title or the era of Japanese. And where they come from, they came from Korea. If you're Japanese, I just said that, you're probably mad at me. Because the reality of it is, Japanese people came from Korea. Koreans and Japanese are actually different physically than Chinese. They're different. Genetically, they're related. And they also, as I show you, related up to Northern Siberians, Finns, and Huns. They are genetically related and linguistically related to all of them. I know, kind of odd. I know you guys, what? Where'd that come from? That's where that came from. So yes, that's why I want to show you some interesting things on why things are the way they are. So IC says, didn't the Torah, does the Torah predate Hammurabi? No. The Torah, if I'm not mistaken, was written around 600 BCE, 700, and I think in that area. 600 or 700 BCE in that area. I'm pretty sure that, I think the Jews, if I remember, if you're Jewish, you may know better history. I'm pretty sure that Jews were, when they wrote the Torah, were under the thumb of the Babylonians. I think that's true. I could be off enough. Someone knows, please let me know. But I'm pretty sure the Jews wrote the Torah when they were under the thumb of the Babylonians in around 600 or 700 BCE, I'm thinking, in that area. Something like that. So, yeah. But no, the Hammurabi's code was before that. It was before the Torah. So, hope that answers your question at least. All right, and grab some more of these if I can. All righty. Let me keep going if I could. All right. So where was it? I showed you that map. So we're good. All right. So now it's, we go past 2000. We now go to about 1000. I'm sorry. No. I do want to go to, I want to stay in China for a second. If I can remember, I'm trying to remember my Chinese piece I was talking about. Merit-based was something else. The idea, what happened here in this time, Hammurabi's code, the Greek city-states, and China, it was the first time that we actually put into play an actual class-based society. Yes. Some of you are going, class? What? I thought class was like from Marx. Nope. I mean, yes, but he didn't start it. Hammurabi started that stuff. The Greeks had class structure, very much class. Hammurabi wrote that down. No. I'm this class, you're that class, you're that class. China, same thing. Class. The Japanese had it too. So they actually, because Japanese copied the Chinese in this one. They created a legal class structure. No, you are this class, you are that class, you are this class. That started 2000 BCE, not with Marx. So yes, this started early on. We've been doing the class thing for a long time, and we're still doing it. So yes, now we go to about 1000 BC, and with that, we now have the Olmecs in America. This is when the Olmecs start to really become the bigger kind of culture. We can see stone things we can see, and we can easily dig this out. So I think that's a critical piece. They were a little bit later than the rest. That's the piece. But now I want to go to India, if I could. 500 BCE. The thing I love about this one is this is when we start thinking about openly, like as a culture, the idea of Buddhism. There's a prince named Siddhartha. And this prince, this is the origins of Buddhism. If you don't know the origins of Buddhism, there's a prince named Siddhartha who is completely and utterly just pampered. He lives in a palace. He's an Indian prince. He lives in a palace. Everything is awesome. He loves life. It's all good. And he then decides, all right, I'm gonna go outside and see what happens outside. As he goes outside, he finds so much suffering. The exact opposite of what he was accustomed to. He had as much food as he wanted, friends, family. He was spoiled brat prince. Goes outside and finds so much pain and suffering that it really affects him. Now, the funny part is he isn't the first Indian to have this happen. He isn't the first Indian to have this happen. This happens with another, oh God, timing. I'm forgetting the timing on this one. Anyway, let me just stay with this real fast if I could. I got to get the timing on the next one. Anyway, so he goes out and finds this horribleness, and he goes around talking to like wise people. And this guy's a prince, tons of cash, could just go back, doesn't do it. Takes like 6 or 7 years, 8 years, whatever, many years. And he's out there, and he finally figures out life is about pain. Life is about suffering. And he sits under a tree. The story is he sits under a tree, and it takes him whatever, 6 days or whatever it is. I forgot. I mean, I don't know what the time is. Whatever. He sits under a tree and comes back and says, "Oh, I get it. Buddhism. He is the Buddha. He is the enlightened one. Origins of Buddhism happens in India around 500 BCE. That part is amazing, and look how much that has spread. Now, the glory of this is that this religion has spread everywhere, and it's an inclusive religion. This is one of the reasons why Eastern religions and Eastern countries are more open religiously. They don't follow one dogma usually. They're open to the religions. In fact, they often overlap. Many parts of South Asia, specifically South Asia and Southeast Asia, you will see things mixed and matched. You'll see people have pictures of Jesus with pictures of their own local deities, and you'll see maybe the Buddha. You'll see different stuff there, right? All mixed. So they don't mind. Any God that'll give them something, they're fine with. They don't care, right? It's all good. Just the spiritual world matters, and they care about that. That's kind of what Buddhism is about. Hinduism too, right? Hinduism too. If I remember right, I think it is maybe someone will correct me on this. It's Ashoka, who was an Indian ruler who fought many battles to create his empire. But his battles were so bloody and so horrible and so much death that it began to affect him too. And he was like, this is terrible. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So we actually decided to stop. He goes, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And he became almost like a pacifist. Hinduism, Buddhism. And why does this matter? We're talking BCE. This is the origins of how someone like a Gandhi can come about from his culture. This culture was already there 2,500 years before. It was already there. This is where this comes from, right? That concept was in India back in 500 BCE. That's why it matters. Roy says, the beauty of Buddhism is that you don't find wisdom out there, but in here. Correct. It's a personal search with guidance rather than deferring to some religious leader who can lead you to wrongdoing. Correct. Absolutely. Yes. Joe says, is anyone else getting ads? Are ads going that bad? I'm sorry, guys. Like maybe they saw it was going to be long and they're like throwing ads up. I don't actually know. So I apologize. Ryan says, I get ads every 7 to 9 minutes. See, Joe, they don't like you. So you get more ads. Or maybe they think you're rich. They give you more ads because you're wealthy. That's your issue. Chaz says, fun fact, we don't know what they call themselves. The Aztec called them Olmec, a.k.a. the rubber people, because they invented the rubber ball. We still play sports with to this day. I didn't know that. Interesting. Here we go. Here we go. Phil says, I was listening to a podcast about the Yakuza, which for those who don't know, Yakuza is basically the Japanese mafia. They came primarily from the dirty classes, butchers and tanners. Yes, in many parts of particularly East Asia, but all over many parts of East Asia, people who slaughtered animals and dealt with animal filth were considered lower classes. So in many cases, they were the lowest class you could get, was that people who dealt with the dirty things. True. Yeah. So that makes total sense to me. Yes. Roy says, Abraham was around the time of the Hammurabi Code, but Moses' last biblical time was way later. Well, there we go. There we go. So I was unsure. Yes. I says, no, the Babylon exile was 586. Turtles were before that. Oh, okay. So maybe they weren't there yet. but I don't think it, I'm 90% sure that the code was before. Yeah, even Roy said the code came before the Torah. So maybe I'm off on the timing on this one. I could be off on the timing, but I'm 99% sure that the Hammurabi's code was before the Torah. That's all I'm saying. Yes. All righty. Roy says, Gandhi, Dr. King, power is better than force. Freeing people without advocating a single act of violence. Yes. Ryan says, Larry Sharpe history shows better than the NFL. True. Absolutely true. That is accurate. All right. I'm going to show you another map if I could real fast. This one is this is the world 1000 BCE. This one here. And you see here, this area I'm circling right here, this is China at the time. The Zhou Empire. This is China. The Hittites are here. The Roman Empire in here. No Roman Empire. There is a Greek Empire right here. The Greeks are right here. They're still here. They're still creating all their stuff. They are, and the Egyptians here. Now there's a high and low Egypt, right? What may sound odd is Upper Egypt was actually southern Egypt. You think of upper as being northern. In this case, Upper Egypt means the Upper Nile. The Nile flows south to north, which is odd. Most rivers that we know large flow north to south. The Nile flows south to north. So the Upper Egypt is actually southern Egypt, which right now is probably, is it Chad now? No, not Chad. Sudan? Is that where it is now? Hold on. Is it Sudan right now? I think it will be. Yes, it will be Sudan. Yes, correct. It would be Sudan right now. It would be Sudan. And when you look at people who say, well, Egyptians were black. Well, Egyptians were black. Egyptians from Upper Egypt were black. They were sub-Saharan Africans. That's true. Lower Egyptians from Lower Egypt, they were not. So there was a mixing. Again, we're not racist. We're tribal. If you were Egyptian, you were Egyptian. Whether your skin was darker from Upper Egypt or your skin was lighter, still, Egyptians were still darker skinned. But compared to Upper Egypt, to Upper Nile Egyptians, you were still Egyptian. It did not matter. So yes, user has name. Yeah, yes, Hudson Band was called Nubia. Thank you. They were Nubians. Modern day Sudan, but then called Nubians. Thank you for that, guys. I appreciate that. Yes. All right. Let's see here. Roman Empire, not there yet. Ryan, on our way. On our way. Not there yet. On our way. Not there yet. So yes, so when people say things like, you know, well, Egyptians were black. Some were. That's true, but not every Egyptian was black. And we're going to find out coming up here, there were a lot of Egyptians who were actually Greek. I will go into that in a moment. So anyway, I just want to put that there. Thank you for that Nubian piece. I do appreciate that. Let me keep going if I could. And I hope this is interesting for you because you're seeing how it does matter today. That was my goal, showing you how it matters today. While Siddhartha is in Egypt, not Egypt, in India, at the same time now there's a growth of one of the first empires, what we would call an empire. I mean, there were other like nations, I guess, or city-states in the Americas, but kind of the first real, what we would probably acknowledge as an empire happened around that same time. And that was the Mayan Empire. That at that point, we could see it. It was clear. It was an empire. It was definitely what we would call, most people call a modern day empire, or we would recognize as a modern day empire. Again, that existed in Eurasia thousands of years before. So again, the Americans were late at achieving that same status. You might say, well, why, Larry? There's a couple reasons why. One, obviously, I said before, is pack animals and the wheel. But there's a second piece, and this may sound odd, but hear me out on this. Every other nation that has created an empire, except maybe like Americans, even Americans maybe, had mounted warriors. Yes, they all had mounted warriors. If we would see what we would call an empire, they all had mounted warriors, whether they were knights, samurai, the Mongols, whatever, they had mounted warriors. This mounted warrior or knight or warrior class, right, was able, some parts say they rode elephants sometimes, depends, right? But I mean, usually it was horse, but whatever. There were mounted warriors. That didn't exist in the Americas, and it slowed everything down. Why? You killed all the horses. No pack animals, no wheels, right? That changed everything. but mounted warriors were a thing, right? The Egyptians had chariots. Mounted warriors were a thing. It's how you conquer. You conquer, but not just you conquer, but because we were a class society, to be a mounted warrior, you really can't be like a farmer, right? It's not really a thing. You have to practice. You got to be able to own a horse. You got to be able to buy armor. You got to buy swords. You got to train. You kind of got to be rich to do that, right? So to have a mounted warrior class means you have a nobility class, means you have a class of people who are landowners, means you have a class of people who can bring armies together, right? And then conquer people and that kind of thing. So with the Americas not having the wheel the same way the rest of the world had, not having pack animals the same way the rest of the world had, and not having mounted warriors, it slowed them down. So eventually, you were going to find when the Spaniards come, the Native Americans aren't ready at all. They're behind, tremendously. They're behind. So anyway, I wanted to bring that piece up, but you guys might enjoy that also. So now I'm going to move forward if I could. I'm going to move now to about 250 BCE in that area. This is now when the Greeks are at their rise and then eventually their fall. About maybe 100 BC, they begin to fall. But their rise around 300 BC, actually, in that area, is the massive rise of Alexander. Alexander comes on the scene. He is trained by the smartest people Greece has to offer, trained by the most elite people that Greece has to offer. And boy, does it show. He's like 20 years old and like begins to conquer the world. Insane. Just insane. He's out there uniting, and he does something that the Greeks had not done before. The Greeks in general were actually relatively xenophobic. I mean, maybe today they still are. They were relatively xenophobic. What do I mean by that? Is while they would absolutely have colonies, they still wanted Greece for Greeks. They really weren't. They would colonize, they would create colonies, but they wouldn't colonize, if that makes any sense. It wasn't a common thing for Greeks. Obviously, some did, but it wasn't a common thing for Greeks. They'd existed, now we're talking 300 BCE, they existed in some format for like 3,000 years, 2,000 years in that area, right? No, maybe not, about 1,500 years. That is it, 1,500 years. And they weren't massive conquistadors. They weren't massive at that. They did some, but not crazy. What Alexander does is he actually gets through most of the East and he conquers it. But he doesn't just conquer it to put it under his boot. He does, of course, it's the ancient world, what we do. But it is something else, which is he Hellenized, he wanted to Greekify the world. He believed in his heart that the Greek ideal was the best ideal. So he was going to give it to the rest of you. That was it. And the armies, which again, didn't happen in the past. Greek armies prior to Alexander tended to be Greek. They were Greek armies. Maybe they'd hire some mercenaries here or there, but they were Greek armies. Now he goes into modern day Turkey. By the way, there's no Turks in Turkey at the time. Turks don't come into Turkey until much later. There's no Turks in Turkey. There's Hittites, Greeks, right? But there's no Hittites. So there's no Turks in Turkey at this moment. But he heads into there and he tries to make them Greek. He Hellenizes the world. He goes into the Persian Empire. He goes into Egypt. He conquers. He actually goes all the way into India. He actually fights elephants. He goes in there. He goes into modern day Pakistan. He goes in Afghanistan, where empires go to die, which is he went there and he died. So yeah, he didn't die in Afghanistan, but yeah, he went there and he did all these things. He comes back and he dies, and the Greeks fall apart when he dies. He has such a powerful personality that when he dies, he's only like 33, 34, something like that. There's a story. I don't know if it's true. I remember hearing it where Julius Caesar looks upon a picture or a bust of Alexander and he says, "You were 33 and you conquered the world. What am I doing?" So yeah. So Isis, I believe, was assassinated. He might have been assassinated. And there were several reasons why he might have been assassinated. Thank you, Isis, for saying that. There are several reasons why he might have been. He took a Babylonian wife. You ain't supposed to do that. As I told you, Greeks were still xenophobic. And they put up with having non-Greeks in their army because they were winning. So they were fine with that, right? So they would put non-Greeks in the army because I'm winning and it's working and I'm getting money and we're killing the world. Okay. Oh, but no. You're the king and you're going to give us barbarian queen? No, that ain't going to work. That ain't going to work. You're not taking a barbarian queen. And many people believe, I don't know if it's true. If anyone knows, I'd love to hear this, that he might have either been bisexual or gay. So that means he was taking a queen to procreate, right? If he had gay lovers, those are the men that he loved, but he would have to procreate to make an heir. So he would find a queen to make an heir. Now, if you're a Babylonian, when he came into these areas and conquered Darius, I believe was I think it was Darius who was the at the time the Persian king. When he was conquering these towns, he was conquering tons of people. Wealthy people were leaving. He literally had concubines there, and the concubine was like, "Well, now I'm screwed because my emperor left." And he's like, "No, I'm here. We're good." So now he wants to now give the Greeks, and this was their problem. The Greeks were okay having these foreigners in their armies. They were not okay having a foreign queen. They were not okay with that. So I do think that if he had just taken a Greek wife to procreate with, to provide an heir for the Greek Empire, he might not have been killed. So yeah, I'm pretty sure he had several male lovers, but he had one he was very close to, and they were trying to kill that male lover, and they killed him and the male lover, if I remember the story correctly. So yeah, next time, right? If you guys ever become Greek and you want to conquer Greece, just take a Greek wife, all right? You can have other people on the side. They didn't care about that stuff back then. They don't care now even. But anyway, just do that. So yes. All right. So in any case, so Alexander goes, conquers all that, and when he falls, the Greek Empire begins to fall. The Greek Empire is broken up into three different groups. Basically, the old Greek Empire, which became old and began to collapse, and here come the Romans. I guess the new Persian Empire, I think it's called Seleucid. I forgot the name of it. I think it's someone will check me. I think it's Seleucid is the Persian Empire, and then of course the Ptolemaic Egyptians. The Ptolemaic Egyptians, that's Cleopatra. Cleopatra was Greek, right? Cleopatra was Greek. She was not black like the TV show. Again, there were black Egyptians, absolutely. Cleopatra was not one of them. She was Ptolemaic. She was from the Greek line. So she was Greek, not black. I know they want to make it that way, but it's just not true. Not for her, at least. Again, not for her. So now you have the rise of Alexander, and then eventually the fall of Alexander, which then became the fall of Greece. However, the Greek influence was throughout the entire world. I'm sorry, throughout the entire world he conquered. The world that he conquered was everywhere. The idea of learning, knowledge, libraries. There were many Alexandrias, right? Remember, if you hear Ia means land of. Alexandria, the land of Alexander, right? That's what that means. Ia means land of, right? Russia, land of the Rus. Italia, the land of Italia. Oh, Ia is the land of. That's why now it's called Turkia, land of Turks. So yes. Anyway, let me keep going if I could. Not just that, though. While this is happening, this is the same time that Rome is beginning to rise, right? Rome is beginning to rise. Rome is starting to rise at the same time that Greece is beginning to fall. Bad timing for the Greeks, that's for sure. As Rome begins to rise, it's to fight Carthage, it's fighting all this stuff. While that's happening, there's also the rise of the Qin. Now, there are two dynasties that happen back to back in China. There's the Warring States, right? The Warring States time where there are 3 different groups, 10 different groups fighting each other back and forth. From that, the Qin dynasty, comes to power. That dynasty is where we get the idea of the Chinese from the Qin dynasty. Now, from that, this is where they first saw the idea of legalism. Legalism was the concept that we need to have very strict laws. Very strict laws, because people are naturally bad guys. That's how it is. If we don't have literally strict laws, people just kill themselves. People kill each other. We've got to have strict laws and very strict. So like even for small things, you have to have a harsh punishment so no one will get out of line. That concept fell in line again with Confucianism, right? Sticking in line, that kind of thing. However, it didn't work at all. It failed horribly, and he was assassinated. Oh no, so he died, poisoning, I think. Yes. Anyway, the Qin Emperor did not last long, and the dynasty collapsed. Legalism was a failure. It still doesn't work. It didn't work. Legalism didn't work over 2,000 years ago, and it doesn't work now. It never works. Harsh laws make people fight back. It does not work, never has worked. We learned it back then, and no one paid any attention, right? Harsh laws were a bad idea. People may not like Hammurabi, but for his time, his code for his time was very fair. Like, you had to pay people back if you did bad things to them, stuff like that. And it didn't matter if you were wealthy or not. Now, if you were higher class, you may have a lesser punishment, but you still had punishment. I mean, you had punishment. Again, before that, you had none. You had none. So, yes. So this was horribly done. And so the Qin Empire begins to fail. When it fails, it's the rise of the Han Dynasty, which, of course, where we get Han Chinese from, right? That's where that comes from. China from the Qin, and then Han, the Han Chinese from the Han Dynasty. From that, we get a much more Confucianism system in the Chinese world, which, again, still affects them to this day, part of their world. So I hope that was interesting. All righty. Let's see here. The AC says, the idea was if someone killed one of your sheep, you killed one of theirs. You didn't eradicate the bloodline. Yes. So it was better, right? Better. Obviously, if you had money or whatever, powerful, but that's still to this day too. But better. We're looking at relative, right? I'm judging them by 3,000 years ago, not today. So yes, absolutely. Anyway, that must be interesting. So, all right. Ra says, Chaz says, Ra Kadet was the city in Egypt that Alexander named Alexandria. Oh, there we go. There we go. Roy says, Confucianism and trade with the East. Well, the one thing that early Chinese did very well, they screwed this up terribly later on. The Ming Dynasty was a disaster. But the earlier dynasties were actually very good with this, Roy. They tried to trade to the best of their ability. They tried to set up one of the most valuable things that China had a lot of, and Japan did too, by the way, but China had a lot of, was silk. That's why it's called the Silk Road. They actually created roads. The Chinese were like, let's make roads to trade our silk. They made a killing on trading silk, tons of money on trading silk. They tried to trade silk all the way into Europe, but they were stopped by Middle Eastern middlemen. Middle Eastern middlemen decided they're going to control it instead and make that money. So that's what actually happened. But yes, you're totally correct. They were trying to trade as much as they can. Eventually, they shut down out of fear. The Japanese did the same thing. And when they became isolated, they began to fail. That's when they began to fail. So yes. User says, does it still exist in China in any meaningful way, though? Mao did well erasing the olds. Yes and no. And what I mean by that is many Chinese rulers will, regardless of where they are, will look back at Chinese culture and say they are the new Chinese culture. So if you were Mao, you said that. Even if you were erasing it, you still said you were doing it the old way, even though you weren't. If you were Chiang Kai-shek, who was basically a dictator, I'm doing it the old ways. So they would say they're doing it the old ways to be valid. That's how they would gain validity for their actions. So yes, in that they always use it. Meaningful, yes, because there still is an idea in China that getting an education is everything, that you deserve an education based upon the merit to get it. That idea still exists. Now, is there tons of corruption within the elites? Yes, of course. Elites very, very rarely follow the rest of the culture. But the average Chinese person, I don't know if you know many Chinese people, I know many of them here in New York, and I've been in China before, I was there for a bit. Many of them still believe in the concept of, if I'm smart, I should get stuff. If I pass the test, I should win, right? That's their mindset. So I think it does still exist in China. Excuse me, in China. I think it does exist. Meaningful. In the daily life and culture, yes. In the government, maybe. Let me give you where it does exist. One of the ideas of Confucianism is reverence of the elderly, right? The older someone is, the more you have to revere them. You see that hardcore hardcore in Korea, right? Korea also Confucianism. The entire East Asia has been affected by Chinese Confucianism. And one of those things you see strong is, if you're older, I have to respect you. Whether you're smart or not does not matter. Your experience that matters. Seniority is key. And that part, I think, does help hold a lot in East Asia. Not as much in America, right? So I think that's a different piece. I hope that helps to at least answer your question. I hope it does at least. So where was I? I was talking about, legalism. Okay. I think now I'm going to move into after the birth of Jesus. I think I'm going to go into that area now. All right, if I can. Which I think what else really matters for us to, I mean, a lot of stuff obviously happens, but what actually matters for us is the key. I'm going to go on to Roman Empire now. So you can now be happy, Ryan. I'm going to Roman Empire. The rise of the Roman Empire. Why does this matter so much? It matters for several reasons. One of the reasons why the Roman Empire's rise matters for us so much is the Romans create a martial culture that, as that begins to happen, the martial culture, it shows that war isn't the only thing. What I mean by that is, now the Romans come in, they attack the Greeks, they attack the Carthaginians, and they make a change. Carthage versus Greece. When they fought the Carthaginians, it was the first time we had, I think for a long time, we had actual total war. And the Romans understood total war, which is, we will kill children, men, enslave people, whatever it is now, does not matter. And when we win, you are destroyed. You are we will just devastate you. We will kill everybody, everything. We will salt the fields, right? And the concept of salting the fields was, for those of you who don't know that concept, you literally put salt in all their fields so they cannot grow anything anymore. Like, this city is gone. Burn everything down and bury the bricks, right? Like, gone, total war. That really happened with the Romans. When it comes to Roman warfare, it was one of the most brutal that we had ever seen up to then, right? Wars had always been bloody and such, but this was like, we don't care. We'll just burn everything. We don't even care if it's good or bad. It's gone. We don't care what help us. We're just destroying it. That kind of thing really didn't happen as much. And particularly not at what I would say a empire scale, right? Didn't happen until the Romans. But they made an exception for the Greeks. And this part's interesting. When the Romans went to conquer the Greeks, they had several battles, obviously, and they won the battles. The Roman short sword and the Roman military technology was the key. But they did a couple things that were special. When they took over the Greeks, they absorbed them. And some people would argue the Greeks absorbed the Romans. I could see either of that happening. It was one of the first times that an empire would happily accept having two separate cultures within it. There was a Greek-speaking Roman Empire, and there was a Latin-speaking Roman Empire. That kind of wasn't a thing before. Now it is, right? And officially, like, it was okay to be a Greek-speaking Roman. That was fine. They didn't get mad at you. You got to speak Latin. They did that kind of thing, right? It was fine. You just do that. So you kind of had that. Not just that, they adopted a bunch of Greek ideas. Republic ideas, ideas of democracy, ideas of ownership, religion, right? They just basically took the Greek gods and just put Roman names on them, right? They adopted a lot. And that was a difference. Usually the reverse would happen. When the Greeks would go over, they would Hellenize the world. The Romans went over and they kind of Romanized it, but they only Romanized it when it came to government and when it came to rule of law, that kind of thing. But culturally, they were very heavily Greek. Some of them, Romans, were mad at that. Some Romans were like, no, Greeks are bad. Greeks aren't cool. Romans are better. Don't do it. But a lot of them were totally okay with it. So you do find as the empire gets bigger and gets bigger and stronger, you do find them actually picking up a whole lot more of the Greek ideas. And many of their more famous generals actually either adopt Greek ideas or actually feel themselves more Greek than Roman sometimes. You see some of that. Trajan was one of them. Hadrian was another. So let me go back, if I could, first to the most obvious ones, which is Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar wanted to fix the empire. The Republic. It was a Republican at the time. He wanted to fix it. He thought it was becoming corrupt and it was broken. He thought he could be the guy who could fix it. That's what he believed. He's the one who thought he could run things like Alexander. He wanted to be the top dog. That's what he wanted to be. So he fights his battles. He gets very popular. Back then, most armies were personal armies, meaning I'm a wealthy landowner, as I talked about before. I am a warrior class. I'm rich. I conquer most of what I take. I keep. I give some back to Rome, but I keep a bunch of the booty that I take when I conquer people. I control land, and I have an army. And the army is not loyal to Rome. The army is loyal to me. I pay my army. I lead it. I make sure that it would work. So the army is loyal to me. So the senators knew this and said, this guy's dangerous. You are ordered to disband your army and come back to Rome to stand trial. I'm sorry, no, and if you don't, you have to come back to Rome and stand trial. Disband your army or you're an enemy of the state, stand trial. Caesar goes, oh, I'm just going to go attack you guys. So he decides. So he takes his army and he marches. And you'll hear two things that come from this that we hear. One of them was the idea of he crossed the Rubicon. The Rubicon is a river in northern Italy, which back in those days said under the Rubicon was officially the Roman Empire. That was Rome. Everything else was either a colony or some of the territory. But once you cross that river, you could only cross that river with an army if the Senate said you could. Otherwise, you were automatically treason, guilty of treason, and an enemy of the state, automatically. And once you cross Rubicon, there was no going back. So Caesar said, I've crossed Rubicon. And then he went on to say the die is cast. You might have heard that thing before. It means now it's over. I've thrown the die. Whatever happens, happens. That was it. And so he heads over there. He wins his battles. He becomes the emperor. He becomes the emperor of Rome. He has a nephew, a grandnephew. Grandnephew? Yeah, grandnephew. That I know of, he doesn't have any kids. He has a grandnephew. Octavius? I think Octavius is his actual name. I think that's true. Octavius, I think is his name. Part of the Julii, which is his tribe or his family, the Julii. So they have him. Octavius is that guy. They eventually kill Caesar because Caesar actually wanted to expand the empire in a different way. He wanted to give citizenship, Roman citizenship, to non-Romans, all those types of things. Ryan corrects me. It is Octavian. Thank you, not Octavius. Octavian. Thank you. I knew it wasn't Oc something. There we go. By the way, yeah. So yes. There we go. No, Octavian. Everyone. Okay, you corrected me. It's Octavian. Thank you. You're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, any case, so he decides, okay, I'm going to start doing these things that the senators don't like. They decide to kill him. They do so. Breaks up into a civil war. Octavian and Mark Antony together, because Mark Antony was one of Julius Caesar's best generals, together fight, and they win. And now Julius becomes, Augustus. Octavian becomes Augustus. He becomes Augustus Caesar. He's the first Roman emperor. Well, the real first one actually named Roman emperor, right? If I remember right, Julius Caesar was not named emperor. Julius Caesar was named, if I remember right, dictator for life. If I remember, he was not named emperor. He was named dictator for life. If I remember, that's correct. But then Augustus was actually named emperor. Minor difference, but I think that's still true. So that happens. Augustus and, of course, Mark Antony fight. They have a civil war. Mark Antony escapes to Egypt. Now, Cleopatra, the Greek Cleopatra, just making sure we're clear of that, the Greek Cleopatra. And I think someone's in the comment says she was half Greek and half something else. Maybe, but she was still Greek is my point. She comes from the Greek family line. Either way, she does come from the Greek family line. So yes. Any case, at that point, Cleopatra, very popular, obviously a very popular queen of Egypt. Julius Caesar goes there. Supposedly, in this story, I don't know if it's true, but this is what I've heard more than once. Julius Caesar goes there. Cleopatra jumps on him, gets pregnant, and has his baby, cesarean. And it has to be cut out, and that's where we get cesarean section from. So, interesting little thing. That's how they got the baby out. Cesarean section. His name was Caesarion, coming from Caesar, obviously. Once that happens and Caesar is killed, Julius Caesar is killed, Mark Antony goes over there and Cleopatra goes, oh, you're the new big guy? I now love you. So now her and Mark Antony are now a thing. Mark Antony loses the battle. him and Cleopatra commit suicide, and Augustus now runs the show. That's kind of how that happens. Why does it matter? Because that was an empire. That was when a republic went to an empire. Why did it do that? Because people looked for a strong man. Remember something. Once Julius Caesar wins the war, they made him dictator for life. Then once Augustus wins the war, he becomes emperor. Yeah. And now we have an empire. Anyway, as this begins to happen, as all this begins to happen, now we have something else. The rise and fall of the Han, they go up and they go down over in that area too. And Kim says, was it suicide by nightshade? No, it was suicide by asp venom. Asp venom. Asp was the way to do that. So yes. Then Julius creates, as Isis, the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, and things start getting really good. The breadbasket of Egypt is sending money and sending everything to Rome. Life seems to be pretty good. Everyone seems to be pretty happy. Let me give you, if I could, I'm going to give you a couple of maps here so we can see what that looks like real fast. This is 500. This is 500 BCE. And you can see the large Persian Empire, the Greek city-states, and then this here is the Etruscans, which will become the Romans. This is 500 BCE, right? And again, up here, same thing. You see the same people I told you about up north, the Huns and the Finns all together. You see a smaller Mughal Empire in this area. I'm sorry, not Mughal Empire, Magadha Empire here. These are Hinduism is here now. Hindu kingdoms are here from Ashoka, and all those people are now here. All right. Now I'll shift if we could. Let's see if I can get out of here. And I will shift to another one if I could. This one is now the Roman Empire is beginning to pop up here. This is now, if I don't know, I think this is 250. Is this 250? I think this is 250. Yeah, I think that's true. You look here, you can now see the Roman Empire here in the red. Roman Empire here in red. And you also start seeing the Mayans. You see them here too. So now you start seeing that here. See the Romans are here. The Han Chinese, Han Empire is here. And you have a Mauryan Empire, which I think this is where Ahsoka is. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's here. And then here we see the, oh, I see it now. It is the Seleucid. That's who it was. Seleucid Greeks. They are here. Thank you. Got it right. And Ptolemaic Greeks, right here. Seleucid was the name. I couldn't remember the name. That's what it is. Just look at that. I would have had it. It was an easy day. I didn't do it though. What are you going to do? All right. Now I'll go to the large area of the Roman Empire. This is when the empire becomes very large. Right here. This is the huge Roman Empire. You see it here. The large Sassanid Persian Empire. And then after the Han fell, you see a broken up Wu and Wei. The Han fell. That's broken up right here when the Han Empire fell. You see a massive empire. It was the largest empire at the time in the world. And here's the Mayans right here. So you can see all that there. So why does all this matter? All right. This matters for us because I want you to take a look at England. England is the key for us, for Americans. Why does this matter for us? For the Americans, for us. And then look at what right now is Germany. This area here is modern day Germany, Germanic tribes. The thing you notice is the Germans were never conquered by the Romans. They stopped. They never conquered the Romans. These are all Germanic peoples. All of these people here, they're all Germanic peoples. These are Finns, but then up here are all Germanic peoples. They're all Germanic, never conquered by the Romans. You can see a big difference in German language, German culture versus Latin languages and Latin culture. You can see it. This is one of the reasons. Not just that. Look at what this is. This is basically modern day England versus Scotland. Scotland was never conquered by the Romans. Ireland, never conquered by the Romans. Different countries, never conquered. England was conquered by the Romans. The other areas weren't. In fact, Wales really wasn't either, which is why Wales was separate. To this day, there's a separate Welsh language. That if you look around, you can actually find a separate Welsh language because it was never conquered by the Romans. So the Romans really only conquered, they really only conquered England. And that changed. We have countries now because of that. Now, of course, one of the pieces here is that when Hadrian came aboard, Hadrian, by the way, loved the Greeks, had a Greek boyfriend or lover. Probably, I'm assuming he was going to have a woman to procreate, but he had a male lover who actually died in Egypt. He was heartbroken because it was his lover. So the idea here, you have this concept of Hadrian coming aboard and saying, we've grown enough. Stop. No more wars. End this stuff. Because the empire had all kind of problems after Augustus. Tons of problems. Trajan was a decent emperor, but many of them behind that were not. Hadrian's like, I'm done. He built Hadrian's Wall, which is not exactly, but basically the wall between Scotland and England. He says, okay, you guys up there, you guys are Scots. He doesn't say those words, but you leave us alone. We're going to stay here. We're done. We're stopping this. We're going to surround. He toured the entire empire. He toured his empire. He spoke to people, all those things. So yes. So Ryan says, you can argue the terrain of Scotland, Ireland, and Wales are a major reason why the Romans did not conquer them. You could, but the Romans conquered Switzerland. The Romans crossed the river, crossed the ocean. The Romans conquered lots of stuff. So they could have. The question is, were they willing to? The Romans were willing. They would do this in the Germanic areas because they didn't want to conquer them. They weren't prepared to conquer the Germans. It was just too hard to do. They didn't want to do it. It wasn't worth it. What would they do? They would build a bridge, build an entire bridge, cross the Rhine or cross some other river, make a raid, trash a bunch of villages, come back, destroy the bridge, just to show how powerful they were. If they wanted to, they could have. They didn't think it was worth it because it was hard. So yes, I would say maybe a reason. I don't know if it was a major reason. I think more like Hadrian was like, we're done. It's not worth it. We're done. We can't keep doing this, right? And of course, they were having problems with their money too. I know their money. Yes, all those things. Super Weapon says the original Roman name for the founding of London is Londinium, I believe. Here we go. Look at that. I love that. Easy day. All right. So let me keep going if I can. So the point I want to bring up here is as the Roman Empire Romanizes that part of the world, it creates the idea of citizenship. It creates the idea of, I shouldn't create. That's not the right answer. It normalizes, maybe it's a better way. It makes it more universal. The concept of citizenship, right? And that you could change your class by becoming a citizen. That was not common. Generally speaking, what you were born. But in Rome, if you were a slave, your children weren't slaves. In fact, slaves could marry non-slaves. And then non-slaves they married could buy their freedom. Things like that could happen. You could actually begin to grow. Now you might go, well, Larry, everyone can. Today, most people can. Some can, but most can today. But back then, that was a big deal. So this changed things. There was a concept of what it was to be Roman, right? There was a concept of what it was to be Roman. And people who weren't Roman wanted to be a Roman citizen. That was a big deal. You could get it by going to combat, doing certain things. You could become a Roman citizen. And that was a thing that was very different and very special. I think that was very important. So you have Hadrian, and now you have something else happening, the rise of Christianity. Christianity begins to rise around 250 in that area, begins to really rise. I mean, the death of Jesus Christ is somewhere around the area of 30 CE, Common Era, or 30 AD, whatever you want to call it, around the year 30, give or take. And the Bible is written about 70 to 100 years, give or take, as they put the books together after his death. It really begins to rise around 250, 300, 350 is when Christianity really begins to rise in here. Paul is fighting, as you know, that old story, and something else happens. Around the same time, there's an Edict of Milan. The Edict of Milan is important because it validated, that's the wrong answer. It recognized, better word, it recognized Christians as not the enemy of the state. And that was not a thing before. You could be a Christian. It was okay, right? It was okay. You add on top of that, about 100 years later, the eastern part of the Roman Empire in Constantinople, you've got Constantine, who literally goes to Istanbul, which what was called Istanbul then? I forgot what it was called. Byzantium? It was called Byzantium. It goes and changes the name to Constantinople, and becomes baptized and creates the Nicene Creed. Nicene Creed basically said this is what it is to be Christian. That it was written down now, right? He creates this thing. That happens around the same time. Amazing. This begins to happen. Now, while this is happening, while Christianity is starting to become more popular, more recognized, the Nicene Creed is created, same time frame, here comes Attila the Hun. Yes, the Hun. Now, remember, the Hun is a horseman. Why? He comes from the steppes. He's not really European, if that makes any sense, right? Remember I told you how that, I kept telling you how, if you look at how the northern steppes warriors and the Finns and the Huns are related. Now it's coming back. Mongols, they're all related, right? Mongols, Koreans, Finns, Northern Siberians, Huns, they're all related. So all of a sudden now we got Huns coming in. The Huns are coming in. As the Huns come in, the people start believing these are like the evilest people in the world. These are like straight from hell, all these things. They believe that. Attila and his horsemen are trashing the Northern Empire, northern part of the Roman Empire. What does that mean? Well, the Roman Empire is in trouble. What does it start doing? It starts hiring mercenaries, proxy wars, things like that, buying him off. Here, we'll give you money, don't attack us. That becomes a thing. And when that begins to happen, that really becomes the beginnings of the end of the Roman Empire. That's when you can see it begin to fall at that point. That's when there's a real problem. Attila is when it begins to fall. Attila actually attacks some of the barbarians. So some barbarians want to join the Roman Empire. So the Romans go, okay, we'll pay you. Now you're Romans. Well, here's the problem with that. When you bring the barbarians into the Roman army, they learn how to be Roman. So now when they turn against you, they can fight you the same way that you fought. They know your weapons. They know your tactics. They know everything because they were one of you. And that was another reason why the Roman Empire began to fall. And many reasons, obviously, but that was one of them also. That also began to happen. So now we didn't get that part. Another problem. Attila eventually dies. I think, is he poisoned? I forgot how he dies. But he eventually dies. The Huns begin to fall apart. But it doesn't stop the fall of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire still begins to fall either way. It still begins to collapse either way. So as that begins to happen, people don't realize something. Many people don't. They go, well, the Roman Empire fell, and some people say it's like 475 AD, whatever number they use, right? Here's the problem. The people who conquered Rome didn't think that Rome fell. They thought they were the new Romans. They didn't know that Rome fell. They're like, no, we're the Romans now, right? I now control the Roman Empire. That's what they believed. So yeah, that was it. So Ryan says, when I saw the historical paintings and drawings of Attila the Hun, I always thought he was a Mongol. Now I know. Yes, they're related. That was my whole point. It's like I bring up these things from the past because they wind up coming back to matter longer in the long run, right? So yes, he was related. Correct. Yes. Thank you for the super chat, Lunatic. Larry, I'm worried about no one. Skill kill. Okay. I like that. For $2. Since you said that, let me take the time to let people know. Look, if you're enjoying what I'm talking about, if it makes sense to you, if you like the back and forth, and if you see that there's some interest, you see how things move, please reshare this, repost this right now. Click the button known as like. Look, I'm doing a show that a lot of people would never want to do. You know, they wouldn't. They wouldn't want to talk about this stuff. They wouldn't make a video. They wouldn't want to go back and forth with you. They wouldn't want to talk about the things that matter. They would just want to reach out facts and bore you to death. I'm trying to not do that. I'm trying to give you some stuff that actually matters. You can see why things happen, how things happen, origins of things. That was my hope. I hope I'm doing a good job of it. If you have not subscribed on YouTube, please do so. Follow me on Facebook, X, and Rumble. And of course, you can always super chat me, as you just saw a Lunatic do. Also, rant me on Rumble if you want to. Also good. Yep. If you become a member, please do so. $49 per month. Great to do so. Join in. And of course, you can join me on Rumble also. Become a member for $49. Click subscribe during the live. Just during the live. Only time you can do that. So if you can, please do so, guys. It does matter. Help me out the best of your ability. And I would ask you, if you have a specific question or issue you want to talk about, please put it in the chat. I'm happy to have that piece. IC says, Attila the Hun died on the night of his wedding. Some say bled out as a result of ruptured esophagus. Ouch. Ouch. That sucks. I love that. Yeah, Ryan says, didn't Attila get killed on his wedding night? There we go. Yeah, there we go. So I guess if you were looking for a bad boy, that's the best bad boy you can get, Attila the Hun. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. All right, let me see if I can grab another map here, if I can have that. All right, yeah, that is the, all right, I will wait a little bit. Okay, yeah. All right. Let me grab one more map if I could to show you what I mean by where the world is going as the Roman Empire begins to fall. There we go. All right. As Rome begins to fall, you can still see the Mayans are still here. It's 500 CE. The Mayans are still here. You can see right here that the Andean Native Americans are starting to pop up here, right here, right? That's starting to happen here. And over here, you're seeing the Ghana, which is Mansu Masa. Mansu? One of those two. Yes, there we go. And then here you start seeing things. The Ostrogoths are here now. The Roman Empire is gone. The Ostrogoths are here now. Germans are here. You can see already England is created here, but it's not England. It's something else. Slavs are here. Khanates are here. And this Qi dynasty right here. Different empires here. Sassanid Empire is still here, right? And here is the Eastern Roman Empire. It still exists. People will tell you the Roman Empire fell, but the Eastern Roman Empire still existed. It's Greek Empire. This area here known as Turkey. Today, no Turks are here. There's no Turks here. What's it here? Turks. Turks are here. Turks are Central Asians. Turks are Central Asians. Yes. So Turks migrated into here later. Turks migrated later. Yes. And most people don't know that. That's why Turks aren't Arabs. Turks aren't Persians. The Persians are here. This is a subgroup of people. The Arabs are here. Subgroup of people. The people who were here were Greeks and are Romans. In come the Turks. The Greeks got to go. Yes. So that whole area was taken over. Just so you get that. So, all righty. Let's see. Grant, thank you for the membership. I appreciate that. Lunatic says, Larry, hit me up. Let's be on. Not during this show, man. This is a show. I'm doing something specific. If you want to do a different show, let me know. Not this one. I'm doing a specific show just for this thing. So the regular show, I'm happy to. I've sent you it before. So yes, but this is a specific one. So Kate says, like button. Yes, please do it. Yes. There we go. Yes. 100%. All righty. Russia is a new Byzantine empire, according to some. Yes. What actually happened at one point is when the Byzantine Empire fell in the 1400s, the Russian Empire wanted to be the new home of the Eastern Orthodox Church. So it made St. Petersburg. That was the point of St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg. That was the whole point of creating that city, so it could become the new home of the Eastern Orthodox religion. That is correct. Yes, that was the goal. All righty. Let me keep going down here if I could. Let's see. Where am I now? All right. Okay. Roman Empire, Western Roman Empire falls. People don't know it. Eastern Roman Empire still exists and is doing well, still surviving. People say this is now the Dark Ages. And when it came to Western Europe, that's kind of true. It's kind of true for Western Europe, kind of true. It was not true for the rest of the world. It just was not. Middle Eastern world, India was literally in a golden age. I mean, it was doing amazing. They were figuring out things like crazy mathematic things. They were figuring out whether the world was round or not. I'm not joking. This is all happening like 500, 600, 700 years. Those years. They're figuring this stuff out. They're figuring out what zero is, doing all these things. This is to this day, you might ask right now, this is the reason why we use Roman letters, but Arabic numbers. We don't use Roman numbers. We don't use Roman numerals. I mean, we do like for like Super Bowl, but we don't use it, right? When I was a kid, you learned it. We didn't do it. We didn't do it. We took Arabic numbers. Why? Because they were in a golden age and they knew math better than we did. They went to a golden age. We said, this is the right way to do this. And we took those. So we use Arabic numbers, but Roman letters. Yes. Now, when it comes to Greeks, they use their own alphabet, right? Of course, their own alphabet. So many Eastern Orthodox people use the Greek alphabet. Western world uses the Roman alphabet. The East Asia uses either Chinese characters or a form of that. The Korean characters are modified Chinese characters. Some people don't know that. It's separate. Here's the problem. The problem with Korean and Japanese is they're not Chinese languages. So how do you, right? Chinese as a Chinese language, the Chinese don't actually, they don't conjugate the same way as Koreans and Japanese do. If you know either of those languages, you know there's different conjugations. The Chinese don't do that. There's no requirement for conjugation in the language, so it's all pictographs. Well, the Japanese have to conjugate. So do the Koreans. So the Koreans made their own. They modified the Chinese, but made their own. Done. The Japanese made it tougher. They were like, no, I'm not doing it. We're going to use the Chinese for the base and then make up our own stuff to conjugate. That was the Japanese answer. Worst answer, Japanese. I'd have rather gone the Korean way. But anyway, that's what they did. So that's why those are different languages, but based upon the Chinese language. So that's why they use that, and we use Roman. But they also use, if you go to Japan, they do use Chinese numbers. They use either Arabic or Chinese numbers. You can go and see Chinese numbers also. So either one of those two. So that's the piece I want to bring up. There was an actual golden age in other parts of the world, right? And also for Germans. Germanic tribes, as I said, were never conquered by the Romans. So what did they do? They began to grow. The Germanic tribes began to grow in Germany as they began to fight the Franks. They began to grow in Scandinavia as they became, of course, the Vikings. The rise of the Vikings in 700. I'm going about 750 now. That year, around that, you've got the rise of many things. First off, you have the rise of Islam. Second, you have the rise of the Vikings, Danelaw, the rise of Russia, the rise of Japan, the birth of Japan, the rise of Frankish kingdoms. Lots of it happens around this time, around 5 to 900 AD. I'm going to say around 750 CE, give or take. All of that stuff begins to happen together. So, yes. Dave says, Korean language is actually phonetic. Korean language doesn't use characters. My point is, it is phonetic. However, those symbols are taken from Chinese symbols, is what I'm saying. They took and they modified to make their own alphabet. That's what I'm saying. So yes, you're right. They still use the symbols that were from China. That's what I think was the better answer. Koreans said, let's make an alphabet, but let's just use symbols that we recognize to make this alphabet. The Japanese said, no, we're going to keep the Chinese symbols and then add our own thing on top of it, right? Kanji is what's called in Japanese. That's the actual Chinese symbol. And then they use either hiragana or they use hiragana, which is a separate system they use to modify the base to conjugate it. They added that. Then they use katakana to add foreign words. Yeah. I don't think you could have made it harder. By the way, 95% of people who study Japanese drop out. Just saying. So you are correct. I'm just saying where it originates, Dave. I'm just saying where it originates. That's all. Yes. So, all righty. Let me keep going down here if I could. All right. I did got that. If I could grab one more map. That was 500. What's this one? That's a little bit later. All right. Yeah. Let me keep going down. Let me keep talking about where I want to go to if I could. All right. I'll grab a couple things. Number one, I will grab the rise of Islam. Around 600 AD, give or take. I forgot the exact time frame, but Muhammad basically creates Islam. What a powerful thing that becomes. At the right time, at the right place, Arabs at this point in time are not powerful as a group of people. They're not weak, but they're not powerful. They're not like the Romans or the Greeks, right? They weren't like that. They were just a group of people who lived in the peninsula, and they were Arabs. That was it. They weren't any super powerful, super weak, just regular. The creation of Islam, the adoption of Islam, made these group of people super powerful, because not only were they able to feel like they were doing something righteous, but they were able to draw other people in. And before you know it, oh my God, you watched all of them start rushing in, and they conquered so much of the Mediterranean, all of North Africa, and relatively easily because people were open to it. I mean, nothing's easy, but relatively easy. People were open to it. They pushed up against the Eastern Roman Empire, and they pushed up against the Franks. After the Roman Empire falls, there is a creation of the Frankish Empire, right? Or the Frankish Kingdom, I should say, not really the Empire, the Frankish Kingdom. It wasn't the Empire yet, it was the Frankish Kingdom, which is modern-day France and parts of modern-day Germany. They're Christian, openly Christian. There's a pope who still exists in Rome. The pope says that Charles Martel, who was the king of France, the king of the Franks, I should say, king of the Franks, that he's great. He fights the Arab Muslims, I believe, in Tours. I think that's right. Maybe Tours. It might be Lyon. I forgot. Someplace in southern France, wherever that is. Someplace in southern France. I forgot where he fights. But they have a massive battle there. Charles Martel is victorious. He pushes back the Muslims. The Muslims are now held back. They control most of Spain, but that's where they stop. And now Charles Martel becomes Charles the Great, a.k.a. Charlemagne. That's where Charlemagne comes from that battle. I'm sure some of you tell me what that battle is. I forgot what it was. Anyway, but that happens. He becomes Charlemagne. All of a sudden now we've made a border. Spain is Muslim. The rest of Europe is still Christian. Or Battle of Tours. Thank you, Philip. I thought it was Battle of Lyon. You're right. Battle of Tours. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. So anyway, that happens. Now he becomes the guy. And once that happens, they want to create a Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire becomes created. It begins to fall apart. It doesn't work out well, but that's why. Any case. All right. At the same time, Byzantine Empire is created officially. This created Byzantine Empire officially. As the Byzantine Empire is created, it's still strong. East Roman Empire is beginning to collapse, but the Byzantine Empire still exists, and it's basically Greece and Turkey together as one empire. It's basically what it is. It's those two. The Tang Empire in China now rises. Is it Tang Empire in China around the same time frame as this rises up, and they do something very specific. They are religiously open legally, but they have a very special way of colonizing. The Chinese had a very special way of colonizing. And what I mean by that. Now, the Greeks, when they were colonizing, they would physically send out people and they would say, okay, here we are. Here's my colony. Let's trade. Basically Greek colonization was trade posts, is basically what Greek colonization was. Trade posts. Romans didn't, colonization was conquer. The Chinese said, we're not going to do that. No. We are the center of the world. And literally that is their symbol for their country. The symbol is Middle Kingdom, sometimes called the Middle Kingdom or the center of the world. So they would literally just say that, center of the world, Middle Kingdom. So that how they would colonize, they would say, okay, country next to me, we're going to send an emissary to you. You're going to come to us when we tell you, and you're going to give us gifts because we're awesome. If they would do that, the Chinese would go, okay, great. You've accepted that we are cooler than you, center of the world. We're good. We're done. Oh, you don't want to do it? Okay, now we're going to invade. So it's a different way of doing it. As long as you show deference, this goes back to Confucian's idea. Do you show respect to your elder? Do you show respect to your elder? Do you give us the gifts? Do you do the thing? You do? Then we're not going to invade you. Oh, you don't? Now you got an ass whipping. That's how they would do it. So they had a very special way of colonizing that was very special. And it kind of happened now to this day, right? Give us what we want and you'll be fine. Don't. And we're going to fight you. I think that's one of the things they've been doing for a while. So while I'm here, I want to give you a, hold on. Lunatic says, Rome became a centralized bank. Also true. Yes. Also true. Chaz says, Rome still stands today. The transition to a church still have a standing army and their own currency, by the way. You mean the Vatican? Is that what you mean? You mean the Vatican, right? I think that's true. Phil says, is Japan known as the land of the rising sun because China was the Middle Kingdom? No, Japan is the land of the rising sun because of their origin story. And around this time, sympathy is the origin story of Japan. They wrote their history. I forgot the name of their history. There's a history book that was written around 712. Oh, the history is written at around that time. I forgot the exact time. It's around this time, 700 or so AD. It's written, and in theory, the Japanese people come from the sun goddess Amaterasu. Amaterasu is the goddess of the sun. She is the sun. So they are the sun people. The sun rises there. They are the land of the rising sun. It's not because of China. It's because of their origin story. And their mythology is the emperor is a direct descendant of the goddess Amaterasu. That is their myth. right? That's how they were born. So they come from the goddess Amaterasu. They actually came from Korea, but don't tell them that. They came from the goddess Amaterasu. So hold on, let me see if I can find what that was. Hold on. Let's see if I can find the Japanese history book, 7th century. Is that going to help me out here? There we go. It is called the Kojiki. That's what it's called. And it's the oldest surviving historical record in Japan. Yes. All right. There we go. That's what it's called. The Kojiki. Yeah. So that's the oldest one. I forgot what it's called. But yes. And it was the seven. Oh, maybe it was actually. Was it actually in the 7th century? No. Okay. No. 700 something. So anyway, hope that was interesting for you. So yes, that is the reason why they're the land of the rising sun, because of Amaterasu. That is the reason why. All right. Let me grab some more of these here. I don't think I'm not going to do the map yet. Let me keep going if I could. So the next thing that begins to happen is about the Vikings and Russia. There is a rise also of the Vikings and Russia. Why does this matter? Russia is actually Vikings. Some people don't know that, but that's true. The Vikings, Germanic tribes, went all over the place. And one of the places they went was into Russia, the city now known as Kyiv, which is currently in Ukraine. But that's the origins of Russia. The name of the tribe of Vikings is, the name of the tribe is the Rus. I'm not joking, which is what the Germans call Russia, Rusland. That's what they call it, that, land of the Rus, Rusland. We call it Russia, land of the Rush, which should be just Rus. So it should be Russia, which they call it Russia because they land of the Rus. They came in, kind of created this, and that was the origins of Russia. And that began to grow. And that's as early as like 700. It's something in that area. I'm in the same area of that. That was happening around the same time frame as that was the rise of Russia being Russia. Now, I got to keep going if I could. Also, the rise of the Vikings in general. The Vikings began to become more and more powerful around this time. Why? Because they were physically huge people who were growing like there's no tomorrow, and there was no space for them in Sweden and Norway and Denmark, and the land isn't great when it comes to farming. What are we going to do? We're going to go someplace else, and they're going to go off and take off, and they went everywhere. They literally went into Russia. They took their boats. They were the first group of people who would portage their boats. What does that mean, portage their boats? They would take their boats and carry them over land. Physically. Just take them. Okay, got the long boat, cross over the Baltic Sea. All right, guys, carry the boats. They carry the boats find a river, and they take the river down. They went down to modern-day Ukraine. They went down to Byzantine. They went down they were on the Mediterranean. They went all the way into the Mediterranean. They went into Egypt. They went all over the place. They went to Ireland. They went everywhere. They were going out of their way to trade and to plunder, whatever. If they could trade, they trade. You can't trade, I'm just going to take it. It's fine. I'm just going to take it. It's all good. They were going nuts all over the place. And one of the places they stayed more than anything, believe it or not, was England. England was wealthy. England had great farmland compared to their land, and they stayed there. Also, the people there weren't Germanics. They were Celts. So they went there, and they basically landed there and stayed there for a very long time. England is a combination of Germanic and Celts and former Romans. This is why English is so special, right? And this is why it matters to us. English is basically lazy German with Latin on top. That's basically what it is. It's lazy German, right? It's a Germanic language. English is a Germanic language. But if you know German at all, it is a very specific language. Well, the people in England were like, I don't know this stuff. Like in German, you have mine, meine, meiner, meinem, meine. We said, we're going to go with my, and that's it. We're not adding these genders. We're not doing. German has 3 genders. English has none. We said, we're not doing that. Now, why didn't we do that? Because what was happening is the people who were there were trying to learn some of the stuff from the Vikings. Why? The Vikings had a thing called Danelaw. Danelaw was all around, particularly northern England. all around it. And Danelaw was actually better to most people than the local barons and kings. Remember, England wasn't a country at this point yet, right? England was a series of small kingdoms, Anglica, East Anglia, all different types of kingdoms. And each king had his own rule and law, and they were all, whatever the case may be, right? All those things. The Danelaws actually had, again, relatively, they had much fairer laws. Generally speaking, the Vikings did not have a really strict class system at all. Again, relative to other systems. They still had a class system, of course, but relative to others, they did not have a very strict class system. So if you're in England and the Vikings come and they got ways to teach you how to fight, they want individual people to have land ownership. They want, like the Vikings wanted land ownership, individuals to own land. That's why they came here. They came to England so they could own land. They didn't want the king to have the land. And then people were like, well, we like this. How do we do this? So yeah. So let me grab a couple of these if I could. All right. Phil says the 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas was good. They were trade with the Arab what? The 13th Warrior is obviously it's an action movie and not really obviously it's action, but it was, you're right. It's based on truth. Antonio Banderas plays a Muslim, but it's fine. Whatever. You can't do that now. He'd be canceled. But yes, that is correct. Right. With that in mind, he plays that Muslim, and he comes and they trade with the Vikings, and he goes back to the Viking place to fight with them. So yes, very interesting movie, and it shows also that the Vikings were illiterate. They didn't have their own language. They sang songs and such. Many of them were illiterate. Something another interesting piece. So, all right. Rick says Norman French is huge in English development. Let me keep going for this here. All right. You're right, Rick. Let me cover this right now if I could. As Danelaw takes part in England, the English still want to fight the Vikings. And they do constantly. One of the people who fights them is their first king, King Alfred. King Alfred is an English king, supposedly the first one. Why? Because he's able to defeat Vikings. It's what he could do well. So most parts of England become united under Alfred, right? Now, Wales is not united and Scotland's not united. But most of England is united under Alfred. Half the people still have Danelaw. Some like Danelaw, some don't. They fight back and forth, but Alfred can unite them. What can't he do? Well, he can't do everything. So Alfred goes to fight one massive battle against the Saxons. And by the way, the story of King Arthur comes from post-Roman Empire England, as they wanted to unite all of England. There was a problem uniting England after the Romans left. And that's where King Arthur comes from. Supposedly it was a guy, there was a former Roman named Arturius. That was a story I heard. And that's where this idea comes from. Now, King Arthur was not written by an Englishman. King Arthur was written by a Frenchman. And why did he do that? Because remember, at this point, when this is written, a lot of English and French are going back and forth, and a lot of France is controlled by England. So it was written by a Frenchman. Mort d'Arthur was the name of the actual story. And then lots of stories come from that, right? Based upon a story of Arturius, who was a former Roman who was trying to unite England, supposedly. Don't know if his name is true, but that's what the story is based upon. I think it's a myth, but whatever. The point being, Alfred actually does it. He actually unites England together, becomes the first king, has to fight a massive battle against the Saxons at a bridge in northern, I forgot the name of the battle, but he fights this battle, wins it. Well, while that happens, the Normans decide they're going to attack. Now, who are the Normans? Okay, the Normans are French. They might say, well, the French attacked. Not really. The Vikings went every place, to include France, and they actually sacked Paris. The Vikings were trashing the French, like there's no tomorrow. They were trashing the French, trashing the British. So the French got smart and said, look, you want land, right? Okay, why don't we give you this land? Let me give you this land. Stay here. It's yours. All you got to do is stop your brother Vikings from killing us. You defend us against your brothers, or tell them to stop. This land and the money is yours. You become, yeah. And they did that. Normandy is land of the Norman, land of the Norse or Northmen. That's where Normandy comes from. When we landed in D-Day, Normandy, that is where that land comes from. Normandy, E is another way of saying land of. Turkey, land of the Turks. Germany, land of the Germans. Normandy, land of the Northmen. That's where that comes from. So yes, that's where you have the E sometimes. Italy, land of Ital. Same idea, right? The E at the end means land of. So That's Normandy, land of Norsemen. They got that land. So these were all Vikings. These were Vikings. They all spoke French, though, because they had the land for decades. So these were all French-speaking Vikings. So they knew that their brothers from the north, the German-speaking Vikings out of Sweden and Norway, they had come down and attacked. They said, well, we'll take advantage. We'll come across. Who came across? William the Conqueror. The Battle of Hastings, 1066. William the Conqueror comes across, French-speaking Normans. Alfred comes from the north. He just got finished fighting the Saxons, turns around, tries to fight the Normans. Can't do it, loses. William the Conqueror takes over England. Why does this matter for us? Why am I specifying on that? Us. Because this is where English comes from. English, if you notice, has two tiers in English. It has a more generic tier and then a special tier. The regular tier comes from German. The special tier comes from French. That is why if you start something, it is a beginning. Come from the German begin, start. But if it's special, it's a commencement, coming from commence, from French. Because all of the leaders of all the nobility of England spoke French. Why? They were Normans. They were French speaking. This is one of the reasons why a language that everyone speaks is called the lingua franca. Everyone spoke French, right? So the lingua franca of the world now is actually English, but it used to be French. So that's how it worked. All the leaders spoke French. Many of them wrote in French. They were all French speaking. So that's why you have different levels for each. So most of the more upper level speeches comes from Latin or French, which is why it's a Germanic language with an overlay of Latin. That's the Norman French who came into English. That's why English is such an odd language. English, by the way, is a language with the most words of any language. It is always also, by the way, why it matters for us as Americans, why English is used so much. It not only has the most words, it has the most nuance. Why? Because it has multiple levels. It has the most nuance. And it has the most specificity. In versus on versus at versus in between. These things all matter in our language. And other languages don't have that. You have to assume what they mean by the context. This is contextual language versus non-contextual language. English is the most non-contextual language out there. Chinese is very contextual, the opposite. Generally speaking, the more international and the more mixed your language is, the less contextual it is, which means you must paint the picture for your audience versus allow the audience to paint their own picture. Why? Multiple languages mixed together, multiple groups of people mixed together. This is why you have Danelaw, which was Germanic, Celts, who still existed from the Roman era, and now French-speaking Normans all come together to create England. We are descendants of England. That's why we have English. So yes, Phil's very nice. He says simplified German. I like that. I like lazy, but it's fine. Either one. It's all good. So yes, I think that's interesting. So Phil says, I have some friends from Normandy, and they have really blonde hair. Yes. Phil goes swine versus pork. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. 100%. Sue Weapon says, if you want to start a beef with an Englishman, bring up William the Conqueror and say they were French. Well, here's the funny part about England. William the Conqueror is French, and their current royal line is German. There's no English people in their royalty. The most English people they got is the Scots. I'm not even, I wish I was joking. So, yes, I wish I was joking. Yes. So, anyway, I think that's kind of interesting. So, anyway, I'm going to give you that piece. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up, Rick. Just that is an important piece. All right, let me keep going if I could. All right, so this is the origin of England and also the origin, by the way, of Germanic states versus France, because the Frankish Empire also breaks up at this time. When the Frankish Empire breaks up, England takes a chunk of it, and also Eastern Frankish Empire or Germany begins to exist. It's not Germany yet. It's a bunch of local states. That becomes the new Holy Roman Empire. That becomes a new Holy Roman Empire. And then that I want to bring that piece up also. Now, after this happens, what happens next? Well, the Crusades. Yes, we decide, you know what we need to do right now? Because we're in the Dark Ages, because we're unhappy, let's go start a war with somebody. Let's go do that. And we did. And we sent thousands of people to go fight. Now, why did Crusades matter? You say, why bring up Crusades? Here's the reason why we're bringing up crusades. The reason why I'm bringing up crusades is the issues we're having right now in Syria, the issues we're having right now in Lebanon, also because of the crusades. Yes, also because of the crusades. Ganjin says Second Reich equals New Holy Roman Empire. That's incorrect, my friend. The New Holy Roman Empire is the First Reich. The Second Reich is Wilhelm II. The Third Reich is man with the mustache. So, Ganjin, that's the First Reich. Yes. The Crusades are a farce. They were always a farce. That is correct. You are right. And it was terrible and it was dumb. And yes, it actually happened. So, yeah. Any case, but we did. We sent thousands of people to go there and fight. And what did we do? We went to the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire didn't care about the Crusades at all and was just trying to milk us for cash. And they did. And more than once, we sacked Christian cities because they pissed us off. That happened. Not just that, we went in and we set up Christian cities throughout all of the area. So many Christian cities set up there. Eastern Orthodox cities. And we fought Eastern Orthodox, right? The Christians in Egypt were called Coptic, still are, Coptic Christians. These are Christians who are just Eastern Orthodox. Eastern Orthodox Christians are in Egypt, are in many parts of Turkey, many parts of Russia, many parts of Serbia, many parts of the Middle East, the Eastern Orthodox Christians. There's also Catholics there too, of course. Most of the people who came for the Crusades were actually Catholic. Why? There's no Protestantism yet. Doesn't exist. So you're either Eastern Orthodox or you're Catholic. That's kind of what it is. Many of them, most of them coming in were Catholics. Catholics thought the Eastern Orthodox were different, so they could sack their cities. I know, it was just, yeah. Anyway, that starts happening now around this time. So at this time, we're making sure that nothing goes well. And people died, people had all kind of problems. It was terrible. So yes, we did that during the whole time. And while that's happening, interestingly, in Southeast Asia, there is a rise in Hinduism. Yes, a rise in Hinduism. So there's a rise of peace in Southeast Asia while we are literally sending people to die unnecessarily and to create little pockets of Christianity all over the place. Nothing but a problem. Let me show you, if I could now, I will show you that map of about 1000 AD. There we go. All right. You can see here the Holy Roman Empire. This is, again, the First Reich. Now France, now England, right? About 1000 AD. Now you have Norway and Sweden who are fighting, who are there. Kievan Rus, you see right here, the Atlanta Rus. Byzantine Empire is here, right? These are all of these are Muslim kingdoms. The Song Empire is here, and the Khmer are right here, right? So you can see it all right now. This is what it looks like right now at that year 1000. Russia hasn't even come across Russia yet. None of that's happened yet. None of that's happened yet. Holy Roman Empire, the First Reich, is right here. Now, within the Holy Roman Empire, there is Rome and Germanic states. This is the breakdown of the Eastern Franks. The breakdown of the Eastern Franks. That's what happened there. All right, we went down that road. He says 3 Reichs and you're out. Yes, that's accurate. That's accurate. 100%. That's absolutely accurate. Yes, 3 Reichs and you're out. And I'm glad. And I'm not mad about that, AC. I'm not mad about that. I'm totally okay with that. All right, so if I can keep going down, now I'm about 1,000. Now we move to around 1200, 1250, 1200. And a couple of things happen around this time frame that matter to us. Rise of the Turks, rise of the Mongols. They all come together. And now the solidification of the English language. And when you add the solidification of the English language, also the Magna Carta, the 100 Years' War. Those all begin to come together at the same time. Why do all these matter? All right. The rise of the Mongols matter because now Genghis Khan decides that he is going to make the Mongols great again. Well, great for the first time, whatever. So people don't know what happened with him. He was actually captured because his father was killed. There's a great movie about the beginnings of him, and it's actually called Mongol. It's the name of the movie. Came out like, I don't know, 15 years ago. It really shows what he wanted to do. And it doesn't show like the wars, him fighting other people. It's how he came to power. He was abandoned as a kid. And because of that, it changed his mind on many things. He was then enslaved by Chinese Chinese kingdoms, and he saw what it was to be civilized. And he hated the fact that his people weren't civilized. And when he escaped, he said, that's it. I'm going to civilize my people. And if I remember, his quote is, I will bring civilization to my people if I have to kill half of them to do it. He was going to civilize his people no matter what. And he did. And he was brutal in the way he fixed his own people. But he was against slavery. Why? He was enslaved. He was against kidnapping. Why? His mom was kidnapped. He was against many of the horrible things. And he was all about culture. This is what made him special. And he's made him special. I mean, to be clear, he was brutal. I don't want to take that away. I want to add on. He grabs all his people and he takes them off to go fight. As he goes fight, he basically tells people this. All right, we're going to your town. Surrender. Just surrender. If you just surrender, we'll just take some stuff. All you cultural people are going to come back to my town so I can take your culture and have it and learn from you. And we'll just tax you and that'll be it. You'll be fine. It won't be crazy. If you don't, we will kill all of you and enslave all of you and kill all of you. And they were like, well, you're a tough guy. And he would just burn them all, just trash them to the ground. Or he would absorb them. Now, when he would fight, he would keep the cultured people, the people who could read, the artists, all those things. He would keep them, retain them, and send them back to his capital city or keep them around. He cared about growing culture. He wanted to grow the culture of his people. That was what made him special. He was kind of reverse Alexander. He knew his culture wasn't great, right? Alexander said, my culture is awesome, so I'm going to, give it to everybody. He's like, my culture is bad. I'm going to absorb everybody's culture. So he was Bizarro Alexander. But then, of course, grew an empire bigger than Alexander's. It was massive how big he grew it. So he would fight on horseback, which was the most important piece. But as he grew, he also created separate khanates. He was Genghis Khan, I mean the greatest Khan, but he also had local Khans. He knew he could do it. Often it was his children. There's a saying, I don't know if it's true. Someone said once that 10% of all Asians are somehow related to Genghis Khan. I don't know if that's true. I heard that before. It sounds amazing. But yeah, so he was, he liked his women. I would say that. He liked his women. So yeah. In any case, this is the kind of thing that made him special as he did that. Now, what also happened though is as he moved into Central Asia, some people didn't like what he was doing, so they left. What did they do? The Turks, they moved into Turkey. This is when the Turks started moving to Turkey. Turks are Central Asians. They're not native, if that makes any sense, to Turkey. Just like the Japanese aren't native to Japan, we aren't native to Americas, right? So they aren't native to Turkey. They physically moved in. And as they moved in, they either absorbed or pushed out people. Another thing is, they were also Muslims. The Turks became Muslims because the area was Muslim. Some Turks were already Muslims, but some of them weren't, and they became Muslims. The Ottoman Empire is a Turkish group, not an Arab group or a Persian group. They are a separate group of people coming from Central Asia. They were pushed out mostly by the Mongols coming in. Now, some Mongols converted and became Muslims also, because remember, it was okay. He didn't care. Be cultured. If that's Muslim, if that's Christian, if that's Confucian, who cares? Just be cultured is what he cared about. And that was the one thing that he brought there. And that's why they pushed him to Turkey. Now, as the Turks come into Turkey, who do they push out? The Byzantine Empire. And the Byzantine Empire begins to collapse. It was already collapsing, but it starts to really collapse. By the time of 1450 or so, I don't know, is that what did? 1450. There's only like one city left in Byzantium. It's just that city, just Constantinople. That's the last city left. And it then collapses. And that's the end. And that's the end of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of Turkey. That's when the Turks become a thing. And that starts around 1200 is where it begins, that area, and then moves on from there. But more important than that, in this time frame, English becomes an actual language. The Canterbury Tales are written. The first English literature written, right? First one, right? Canterbury Tales is written in what we could recognize at least as kind of modern English, right? It happens at that point. That's that mix of German. That's that mix of French. That's that mix of native language. English becomes a real thing. But not just that. Robin Hood is written. Why? The ideas of Robin pop up from this time frame. Why? Because the Magna Carta is written. And what was the Magna Carta? Was that so important? The Magna Carta was the equivalent. Hammurabi. Hammurabi says, I'm a king, but I'm going to write down laws that everyone has to worry about. I'm just going to make up the laws I see fit, which is what almost everybody else was doing, right? He did that. Well, now in the West, here comes the Magna Carta saying, even though I am a king and God made me the king, I got some rules too. And you have some rights. I mean, not a lot of them, but you got a couple. I mean, not many, but you got some, right? So you got some. So I think that piece was without the Magna Carta, there's no constitution, right? And that happened in 1215. If I remember that, 1215 is when it happens. And the idea of habeas corpus, right? Where's the evidence, right? It's not what it means physically, but it basically means where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? You can't just do things, yes? And also it happens in this time, the 100 Years' War begins and ends. That war is a war that kind of gave England a whole lot more power than it ever had in the end. Now, in the Americas, the Aztecs rise. The Aztecs were probably the biggest empire ever, probably in the Americas. They rise. Now, that's late for us. That's late for the Americas, right? They're rising in the area, 1300 AD in that area? That's way late. And again, as I keep talking about it, now you know how that works. Way late. I'm now going to see if I have another. Do I have another one of these? All right. Yeah, there we go. Let me grab one more map if I can, so I can show you what I mean by this one. So you can see this little map. All right. This one here shows, this is China again, around 1200. And then here you can see what was the Holy Roman Empire. And then here is England and Wales. You can see that. And then this, of course, is the Norse areas right here. There we go. So, all right, let me give you one more if I could. This one is, oh, that's not a good one, is it? No, that's not a good one. All right. Let me show this one here. This is another map. This I think is around 1200. Is that about right? This one, maybe 1500, maybe 1500, maybe in that area. Yeah, maybe 1500. All right. This one here, you can see some of the old khanates that are now broken up from the Mongol Empire, all broken up. You can see France, England, Scotland, right? Scotland's still a separate country. You see that there? Of course. Mansamansa's here. Yep. This is the Inca here and the Aztec here. You can see it there already. So give you some of those so you can see what's going on here. All righty. Let me keep walking down here. Phil says, the farmer's tale is dirty. Many of them are, but that was the whole point. It was an actual chat back and forth. Yes, absolutely. That was it. So, all righty. Let me keep walking down this road a bit if I can. All right. So now we're talking about 1500, give or take. The Constantinople falls, as I say, but something else begins to happen. And that is the subjugation of the Americas and the exploitation of Africa when it comes to slavery. You start seeing this begin to happen around 1500, give or take. That's when it begins to happen. It's the rise of England and Spain and the fall of the Islamic world. It begins to fall, right? All this begins to happen around the same time frame, around 1500, give or take. You see Constantinople collapses. They start to subjugate the Americas as the Spanish enter, and then others do too, but heavily the Spanish. England begins to rise as it defeats the Spanish. The Islamic world begins to fall as it becomes more, again, isolationist. And so do the Chinese. The Chinese also become isolationists. As they become isolationists, they begin to fall. Not just that, Japan becomes isolationism. As you become isolations, all of a sudden you see things begin to fail. What made the Europeans so strong really was their competition. That really was the biggest reason. They had to compete to survive. When other people became much more isolationist, they fell behind, they stagnated. You saw that with China, you saw it with Japan. Sadly, you saw it also in, as I mentioned earlier, Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa suffered for several reasons. One of the reasons I mentioned before, lack of stonework compared to the Americas. The wheel, mounted knights didn't exist. That was a big problem with Africa and why it was so easy to grab them. Not just that, their own culture was open. Again, we aren't, I go back to it again, we aren't naturally racist. We are naturally tribal. So they were able to enslave people and sell to other tribes. They didn't care. And Europeans were the same way. Europeans didn't care if you were African or not. They were like, are you Portuguese? Or are you French? Or are you German? They were much more like that. We were tribal, not racist. That is definitely a big piece. So I want to make sure that part was clear too. England begins to rise specifically because of their defeat of the French, the Spanish Armada. Big deal. Drops them. All of a sudden they become to rise. And then the next thing happens. Martin Luther puts his 95 thesis up, and there is the crack between the Protestants and the Catholic Church. Oh my God. Then Elizabeth I comes on board, and when Elizabeth I comes on board, it is the rise of England. Oh my God, England is taking over the world. You see it begin to happen at that point. She is the beginning of everything. But something else happens. Russia grows. 1600 is when Russia begins to grow in Asia. Russia begins to grow in Asia because, of course, by this time, the Turks have moved. The Khanates are gone. They've broken down. So now they can open up and cross over. If I can find one, I think I had a map of that. I think I did have a map of that. Let me see if I can find it. I think I had a map of Russia growing. Didn't I? Did I? Hold on. No, I didn't. All right. I didn't have that one. Sorry. All right. Here I'm going to do 50. I'm going to give you a map of 1500s. Maybe that's a good one. That's what that'll do. This is 1500. You can see here, if you look over here, these are all the Mongol Khanates that have broken up, right? The whole thing broke up. And then here is Russia. This is Russia right here and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. This is where it is right now. This is now the Holy Roman Empire in France, England, and Scotland. And the Ottomans are here. By 1500, the Ottomans have taken this over already. The Ottoman Sultanates have taken over this area. The Ottoman Empire exists already. 1500 already exists. This is the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty was a disaster. The Ming Dynasty was an absolute disaster. It lasted for a long time, but then was an absolute disaster. I'll explain it in a second. And here are all the tribes. You can see all the tribes and the peoples here in Africa, and they were happy to screw each other over. Happy to. So, all right. I will then grab, this is now, all right. I'm going to move to 1700 just to show you what it looks like. By 1700, this is the Russian Empire. Look how huge it is. Russia has become huge. The Mongols are gone and the Qin Empire is here. All there. Japanese shogunates here. So this is all Tokugawa, it's the shoguns here. Germany is still the whole Roman Empire. And now you can see how the Spanish have come in here, Portuguese have come in here, British and the French have come in here in the Americas. All right, so why does any of this matter to us? That's the answer. Why do we care? Nice little history lesson, Larry, but you really like, I mean, who cares? Well, let me explain why it matters to us. As I said, I will do this only because it matters to us. All right. There is a Peace of Westphalia after the 30 Years' War. This happens in 1648. Why does this matter? This is the beginnings of the idea of sovereignty of a nation and the beginnings of the idea, of countries and people having citizenships in the West. It changes how we think about things. The idea of religious freedom, all of this happens at the Peace of Westphalia after the 30 Years' War in 1648. I think that's correct, right? It also shows the difference, the breakup of the Habsburgs and the Prussians. So now we're going to see this happen about 200 years later. It's going to be big fight between these two countries, these two areas. And it sets up the idea of a German state. This is the idea of one up. Also in the East, the Ming Dynasty falls. When the Ming Dynasty falls, the Manchus take over. And that makes everything change. China becomes, completely insulated. Japan is completely insulated. So that now they're easy to be colonized. They're easy to be subjugated because of that. Now 1700 comes around that time. Spain begins to fall. And for the first time in around 1700, England is Great Britain. They actually join. Scotland and England join. They've been fighting for years, but swapping people for years, having joint battles for years, fighting each other for years. They finally create Great Britain. That happens around 1700. And at the same time, what happens? The rise of North America. Why did North America rise around 1700, 1750? It began to rise for two reasons. One, obviously, was a trade. Clearly, that's one reason. Second reason is, believe it or not, rivers. I talked about this from back in the 4000 BC, 3000 BC. The number one thing that people used to grow on was rivers that flooded. Well, now in 1750, 1800, America has some of the best river systems on the planet. Not some of the best river systems on the planet, but by far. The most fresh water by far. What does that mean? We can create tons of trade, tons of traffic, tons of fish, tons of everything. And you do see how that matters. You do see how America can grow and people want to. So North America begins to grow. The second piece that happens, colonization, like there's no tomorrow. Colonizing begins heavy in 1750, 1800s. They start colonizing everywhere. 1800s, what happens next? What matters to us is then the rise of democracies. The idea of free thought, the rise of capitalist thought, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution. But now we're really subjugating Africa and China. Centuries of competition made Europe very strong, and the sub-Saharan Africa and East Asia was not ready for it. Now, here's the difference. 1800s come, the Chinese don't know what to do. They are falling apart, a disaster. They cannot respond. But when the Japanese get pushed, when, I talked about this before, when Admiral Perry shows up in 1853, that's right, 1853, he shows up, the Japanese respond amazingly well. They're the only nation to respond well compared to this. I mean, the only one. And that's where they became special, because they actually did the right thing. Lorenzo brings this up. He says, Japan was smart to get their act together to avoid being colonized. Yes, they could have been colonized. They were not. Why? They followed the Mongol concept. They said, our culture isn't good enough. We need your stuff. And they got everybody bring their stuff in. If you remember the movie, The Last Samurai, with Tom Cruise in it, they were showing this, how the Japanese were adopting everything they possibly could adopt to become new, to be able to fight, to be able to stand their own. And it worked. Now, sadly, they became imperialistic and lost World War II. But still, they were able to deal with this better than anybody, any other nation that was behind. They were super isolationist, and they recovered. The Chinese super isolationist and did not recover food till recently. The Chinese, the destruction of the Ming dynasty was so bad when they fell, it screwed China for decades, for centuries. For centuries. They can never get back. It was terrible. So let me go back to now America. Why does America rise? And why do the Native Americans can't do anything? Why can't they defend it? Many reasons why Native Americans can't defend themselves. Many reasons. Reason number one, obviously, is disease. Disease was one of the worst things that trashed the Native Americans. Disease killed more people than anything else. So number one was disease. But besides that, it would have been better. The Vikings found America literally around the year 1000, give or take, in that area. The Vikings found North America. But the Native Americans fought them off. Too bad they shouldn't have. They should have let them be there. They should have let these dirty Europeans, all the diseases, come to America early. You would have seen the Native Americans. They would have learned what the Vikings knew. They would have learned, and they would have got disease, and they would have been able to recover. Native Americans could have defended themselves, had their own empires. There'd be no America as we know it, right? Maybe there'd be an Iroquois country and maybe a Sioux country or whatever would have happened. Who knows? Maybe an Incan country, whatever. That might have happened if they just let the Vikings come, not fought them off, taken their diseases, and then recovered from them. They would have eventually done so. The Vikings had nowhere near the numbers to conquer America, not even close. The Vikings were stretched just to take England, right? So that would have happened. If that would have happened, the Vikings would have showed them how to use metal the right way. The Vikings would have shown them what horseback is. The Vikings would have taught them how to go back and trade, all those things. If they would have let the Vikings stay In the year 1000, when they landed in Canada, they would not have been destroyed. See that? Don't be so mean. I'm teasing, but that's true. That actually would have happened. Without that would have actually happened. They wouldn't have been able to deal with this, but they couldn't. Disease was number one issue. After that, you have other issues. They weren't prepared to fight as a unified group. The Japanese were. The Native Americans were still tribal within their own groups. They were still fighting. They were using Europeans to fight each other still because they didn't recognize what was happening. They didn't recognize. I'm sure some did, but as a whole, they didn't recognize what was happening. They did not. So you got number one, disease. Number two, you got, oh my God, we don't recognize that this what's happening because it wasn't the thing that they did. So they didn't recognize that. That was problem number two. And problem number three was they were so far behind. Now, many of them caught up, right? But nowhere near as fast as they could have. And by the time they were able to cut up, by the time they were able to catch up in any way, shape, or form, America was a powerhouse. So they had no shot. So yes, they just had no shot whatsoever. And again, I bring that up because they were late. This goes back to as 15,000 or as Chaz says, 22,000, whatever, BC. Back then, they came over late. Killed all the pack animals, didn't get everything. Now it's too late. So yes, Phil says, by the time Tecumseh came along, it was too late. Yes, accurate. It was already done. Phil goes on to say the Comanches took advantage of the horses as well. Horses and rifles. Look, Native Americans are humans like anybody else. They can adapt. They can adapt. But at one point, it's too late. Yes, it's just too late at one point. That's a problem. So yes. Planet says, probably helped that Perry threatened to flatten the defense if he didn't let him in. But they learned less. Yes. Yes. 100%. You're right. The point is, the Chinese tried to fight back too and didn't work. It didn't. It's not the right answer. So yeah. Anyway, let me keep on up again. I think I showed you. Did I show you that last map? I'm pretty sure I did. All right. So that was that point. Let me keep going for a little bit longer. Let me see how this matters for us again. The 1800s, it is the rise of democracies and free thought and capitalist thought, the French Revolution, all those things. And the funny thing is we decided to do it just for us, not for anybody else. So we get to have freedom. The Haitians, they don't. We get to have everything, but the Africans, they don't. We get to have colonies, but the Japanese, they don't. So we did all those things. While that was happening, now we start creating nationalism, real nationalism, not just empires, but nationalism. In the 1850s and 60s and 70s, what do we get? The creation of modern day Germany, the creation of modern day Italy, the creation of modern day Japan. All those three things happen. At the same time, you have America actually becoming America because we fought our Civil War. And once the Civil War is done, this is the country we are now. That's what happens. That happens all around the 1850s. It's a big time for nationalism, a big time for nationalism. So nationalism happens. So what happens after that? War, of course. And that's the beginnings of World War I. The idea of monarchies, right? Take over and the monarchies show, once I have nationalism and monarchies, I got an army, I'm going to use it. Lots of small wars here. Eventually World War I happens. And World War I happens, several things happen. One, it is the entry of modern life, the entry of modern warfare, which is a systematic warfare that is brutal and is industrial. It is industrial warfare, right? That's the issue. It is industrial warfare. And since the Romans' total warfare, this creates a similar thing of industrial warfare. Not just that urbanization, and it's the end of monarchies. Monarchies begin to end in the beginning of the 19th century, 20th century. Monarchies go away. And we try to figure out what democracy is. And we haven't really talked about democracy. We talked a little bit 100 years earlier, but it didn't work. Remember the French tried democracy? They got Napoleon. The only people who democracy actually worked for was America. That was it. And we had slavery. So only we had done it. The Greeks had tried it before, but no one else really did it. Now we're bringing it back. And what happened when we tried to force democracy on people? What do we actually get? We got totalitarianism. We got fascism. We got communism. That's what actually happened. The monarchies walked away, but we still had that. 1950, during that time, we end World War II. We have the rise of America. America was rising, but then, of course, we become the single power. And we also have something else. We have the beginnings of the end of colonialism. That's a big piece. The end of colonialism. That's the piece. In the 2000s, with the rise of technology. The rise of technology is the biggest piece we have in the 2000s. I hope I covered most of it. Let me grab a couple of maps if I could. This is 1800. And you see the Russian Empire right here. You see the Russian Empire, how big it got. From about 1500 to 1800, 1600 to 1800 is where it gets massive. It takes everything over. The Mongols are gone, and the Russians have taken over all of that area now. It's massive. And by the time the U.S. is as big as it is, you can see that piece too. This is the U.S., Mexico, Russian Empire. Huge. This is around 1850 in that area. Germany isn't a country yet. Italy's not a country yet. These aren't countries. Italy and Germany are not countries yet. They're not. They're not countries yet. Think about that, how young those countries are. Think about how young they were kingdoms in the 1850s. We had been a democracy for 70 years. They were still kingdoms. Yes, this really did change. That's the piece that I think is kind of funny. We don't always get that. So, all right, I think I covered most of that stuff here. Let me grab some super chats if I could. Super Weapon says, $5, thank you. What's the difference between an empire of old versus a nation by today's standards? Sure. Empires survive on war. Nations do not, right? When a nation goes to war and it loses, it's horrible. When an empire goes to war and loses, so what? Romans were at war the whole time. Lost wars, lost battles, won battles, what happens? They were fine. They kept going. They're an empire, right? America loses wars all the time. We lose war, win war, we haven't won a war since 1945. Win, lose, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. When countries lose wars, that's a problem because they're gone. So an empire is something that is massive. It is usually massive based upon physical size, usually, but also financially and also influence. So I think that's a big difference, right? A nation is just a country, which can go, like, if France loses a war, it's bad. British Empire lost tons of wars. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? They lost tons of wars. And they kept going. So I think that's a big difference. There is a difference between the two. A nation is different. So, yes. All righty. Phil says, my grandfather was born in the 1930s, and she still was Sicilian at the time. Ooh, look at that. I like that one. I like that one. IC says, rise of technology to fall of civilization. I agree with you. And that's why I brought the rise of technology up. This is the challenge that we have now. Our challenge now is the rise of technology. The rise of technology crosses over national boundaries. The rise of technology crosses over family boundaries. The rise of technology crosses over everything. This is our biggest challenge right now, the year 2000. And I just gave approximates. And that crosses everything. In many cases I was talking about before IC, I was talking about, well, this was happening in East Asia. This was happening in Russia. This was happening in the Americas. The rise of technology, everywhere. It affects every single person. You're seeing it in China. You're seeing it in Russia. You're seeing it in Africa. You're seeing it everywhere. And we have not figured this out. So the USA rises, colonization begins to end. And we don't have an answer for that either. Why are we fighting in Syria? Colonization. Why are we fighting in Africa? Colonization. Every place that was colonized is still having trouble. They're fighting. Venezuela, colonized, right? I mean, these places are all colonized, right? There's still a problem. We just drew lines and said, this is a place now. It's a problem. So we do have to worry about this. We didn't find a good answer for colonization. Our answer was the Peace of Westphalia, right? And that's why I brought that up. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 said, sovereignty matters, countries matter, lines on the map that we draw are critical and important in everything. It matters. So now we write these lines in the sand in the Middle East and go, Peace of Westphalia, this is where it comes from. It's a culture comes from this. We have to respect it. Okay, but we made them up. But we just made them up. That's the issue. So, Phil, thank you for $2. Rip Jimmy Carter, he dies this afternoon. Thank you, guys. I didn't want to interrupt, guys. I know you guys, I wanted to finish. I saw it. Usually if I'm doing more of an AMA type, I jump on board, but I wanted to finish this. And I think I've gone through the whole history, so I'm happy to have this on now. So thank you for the $2. I appreciate it. Roy says, Super Weapon says, technology has always been rising. It's just that it's the speed of it has gone exponentially. This piece is a big part. All right. I want you to imagine something. if you are a average person in Europe, in Asia, in say the 1700s, 1800s even, you might see one technological change in your lifetime. You might, right? You might see a special plow or a special kind of gun or a special type of machine. You might see like the cotton gin or a steamboat, right? You might see like one big thing. You might experience one big thing in your lifetime, maybe two, but probably just one. Today, you see three in a year. Like it happens so fast. You're right. We as humans aren't able to adapt anywhere near as fast as this happens. 100% true, right? It's really a problem. You're totally correct. Absolutely. Ryan, thank you for $5. Rise technology can be summed up as the Marine Corps preaches, adapt and overcome. Yes, but we are humans. And sometimes we screw this up. And I think right now we are. We haven't figured out how to adapt and overcome. We haven't figured it out yet. You're seeing it in our business. You're seeing it in our work. You're seeing it in our schooling, right? I remember this is recently, last 5 years, teachers saying to my kids, you can't use an internet source. You have to use a magazine or a newspaper. And I thought, the fuck is wrong with you? Who has a newspaper magazine in their house? That's stupid. Internet's not good anymore? Stop. You're an idiot. Stop. And I would tell teachers this. And I didn't get along with teachers, obviously. I was like, no, we're doing it. Put that in. She said, no, I don't care what she says. She's an idiot. Tell the teacher, your dad said this works. She's a problem. She can call me in. Literally, I would say that. Call me in. Happen all the time. So we haven't even adapted to this. We're still like, who has a magazine in their house? I mean, some people do, I guess. I don't. I've had a magazine in my house in years. Newspaper. Who the hell does that? Stupid. But yes. Anyway, we haven't. But you're correct. We should. Cage Zone, $5. Thank you. In your opinion, who/what is the most successful country, civilization, etc., for all people, not just the leaders, conquerors, etc.? Wow. It depends on how you define success and the most amount of people too. And is it by average? It's a tough one. I would say that one of them, the problem is countries rise and fall, right? Countries rise and fall. I would say there was a time when I would say it would be the British Empire. There was a time because the idea of being British was wonderful for most people. That makes sense. There were obviously Brits who were suffering. But if you look at the height of the British Empire, for the British people, not for those they were oppressing. So that's what you said, country. So I'm having to beat up. For those that were colonizing, clearly this was not a good idea. But for the average British citizen during the height of the British Empire, it probably was pretty good, again, relative to other nations and other people, and relative to their own British people, if you go back 100 years, 200 years before. The British Empire of the 1700s, there were a lot of unhappy Brits. That's when they came to America. There were so many unhappy Brits. The British Empire of the 1700s was not a great place to be. The British Empire of the 1800s, probably pretty good when you look at, again, other places, other nations around the world, and then compare it to the Brits before. Now, England still, I mean, if you want to live in a country, I'm sure you'd rather live in England than other countries. But England, kind of not so great now. Kind of not so great now compared to what it was. Again, relative to others. I would say America, except for there's two holes in America. One of them, of course, is slavery. So if you're going to enslave 20% of your population, that's a big one, right? It's a big one. So I think that's an issue. If you take away the slave population, how about that? If you take away the slave population, probably America, right? I mean, if you take away the slave population, you had more people who are landowners, I think, than any other place in the world by percentage. More people who had more control of their own labor than any place else in the world. So if you take away that huge chunk of slavery, I would say America, after slavery ended, America was pretty good, but the Gilded Age did create a large wealth gap that didn't exist. I mean, wealth gap existed, but not to that level. So in theory, America after World War II Maybe. Maybe. Yeah, you know, I go maybe America after World War II. Maybe that part of America, maybe 1950s, 60s America. There was a segregation problem, but again, I've got it. I'm saying overall, right? The question is a very detailed question. It's a very nuanced question. If we're saying overall, there was a part of my population who wasn't aware, but even the Black population in America under segregation, while it was doing poorly, there were many parts of the world in 1950 who were still also doing poorly, right? So China was being devastated in the 1950s. Russia was being slaughtered in the 1950s. So yeah, I think maybe 1950s and 60s America would also be great, even with the problem of segregation, even with it. When you compare it to others, So I think as a country, maybe that's it. I don't know what you mean by civilization. I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you're saying like Western civilization, if you're saying that Eastern civilization versus Western civilization versus Middle Eastern, whatever, Western civilization obviously has the best overall outcomes, even with the horrible problems it has. Just look at the amount of starvation and death in the East compared to the West. Look at the unhappiness in the East compared to the West. So if you're going that route, I'm not sure. It's a tough question. I'm trying to answer. I'm not trying to dodge. I'm just trying to really walk through this in my head where I am. So yeah, maybe. So what I was thinking for the $5, there's an interesting parallel between protein folding biology and its rate of change versus our technological and information-based world. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but that sounds amazing. Yeah. IC says Black decline happened post-civil rights, family structure innovation, nanny government stepped in, and the Black community stepped down. 100% true. And most of that was the war on drugs and the war on poverty. The war on drugs and the war on poverty literally destroyed the Black family, just ripped it to shreds, trashed. And here's the worst part. This is the part that so many people don't get, and Americans don't get. When you start trashing one group of people, Black people in this case, it always comes back to bite the others. Gun control was about originally keeping the guns out of the hands of former slaves. That's what it was. Now, white people don't get to have guns either. See that? You screw yourself up trying to stop Black people. Don't do that. Let everyone have what they want to have, right? You saw about 20 years ago, give or take, people were like, the opioid crisis is destroying America. Opioid crisis was destroying the Black America in the 1980s, 1990s. Been destroying Black America for decades. Now it came back to white people. Every time. So when you start trashing, the war on drugs, the war on poverty, trashed the Black family. Now it's trashing the white family. White families get trashed too. All the families are trashed now. That's how it works. It doesn't stay. So yes, you are correct, IC. And it was a terrible one. So absolutely. Kim says 1950s America was good. Yes, again, there were issues, but I think how do I deal with that? Ryan says, another F-bomb by Larry. Me fighting my daughter's teachers always made me angry. I can't stand the school system. I can't stand it. And I fought it constantly. I fought it when I was a kid, and I fight it now. So yes, I can't stand it. I cannot. It drives me crazy. Lorenzo says, a lot of African countries that were colonized by the French are still being screwed over by France through economic means. Yes, this is why they want the French out of their countries and embracing the Russians. 100% correct. The funny thing is, in North America, the French were some of the best colonizers. So again, it's relative. In North America, generally speaking, the French were, if you were going to be colonized, not Haiti, if you were going to be colonized by someone, whether it was Quebec or the French or the British or the Spanish, you did not want the Spanish. You did not want the Spanish. You'd rather have the French. You deal with the Brits if you could run fast enough. That's how, if you had to choose. The French would accept Haiti. Oh my God, were they terrible in Haiti. And to your point, because the Haitians revolted and they made the Haitians pay reparations, which destroyed the Haitian country for how many decades now? Is over a century now, right? Yeah, 2 centuries now? Whatever it's been, right? Forever. Destroyed Haiti. So yes, the French have been bad in West Africa, and the Russians are like America was in the Middle East in the 1920s. We just wanted some money, some oil. We should buy some oil, man. We don't want to conquer. We should buy some oil. That's it. That's who we were. Not anymore. Now we invade. Now we're in Syria. But back in the 1920s. The Russians are that way now in West Africa. Like, hey, we just want some cash. You keep your country, run any way you want. We don't care. So it has changed. I completely agree. Yes. Let's see here. Phil says the French didn't create settler colonies as much as the British. The French would have minimal French settlers and control using local people. Yes, they were still bad colonizers, but again, we're doing the level. So yes, we're doing level. Kate says thanks for about LS's insight. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm trying to make this make sense for everybody to have a good place to have this conversation. Super Weapon says protein synthesis / folding grows and builds upon itself slowly, then builds momentum. The larger, no one's coming. Oh, that's what you mean. Thank you. That's clear. Thank you, Super Weapons, for specifying that. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to get the actual stuff. So good. I appreciate that. Good. Number 2, the biological system. The quicker it grows, i.e., we have large systems, institutions today so change happens much quicker. I would argue the reverse. I think that's one of the problems. I'd argue the reverse. Our large institutions don't change anywhere near fast enough. Technology goes fast, right? Technology goes. And our institutions collapse. They don't do it well at all. Mike says Belgians. Ooh, interesting, Belgians. I'm going to do a yes, but on that too. For those of you who know, Belgium was just created, I think, 1830. Is that about right? I think 1830. Hold on. I think it's 1830. Belgium was just made. There were so many, after the Napoleonic Wars, there were so many people who were fighting over this land. They said, hey, let's just make a country. Let's make it a king, and we'll say it's neutral so we can stop fighting each other. That didn't work, by the way. But that's what it was. And so, yes, the problem with Belgium is that, boy, were they bad to their colonies. Like, Leopold was like really bad. Yep, King Leopold, you got really bad to his colonies. But yes, he was good to Belgians. So I think you have to do that. Origin, Belgium. 1830, I was right. Yep. Southern Netherlands rebelled, 1830s, modern Belgium, and then everyone recognized it. Yeah, that's fine. 1830. So they're new. They're also new. So King Leopold, as you mentioned, yes. Boy, was he not good to his colonies. That's all I'm saying. So you have to add that piece, like America, take away the slaves, America, Belgium, take away the colonies, Belgium. Yes, but you got to take away that piece. I think that's it. You just got that piece has got to go. That's all. So Ryan says, are Quebecers in Canada and Cajuns / Creoles in America related or just very similar? They are related in that they were all French colonies, right? The French controlled Quebec and then the entire Mississippi River down into Louisiana and then out into Haiti. They controlled that whole area. Napoleon sold us Louisiana territory because he wanted to fight his wars. He didn't want the colonies, so he sold it to us. 1803, is that right? 1801, 1803, 1803. Thomas Jefferson, pretty sure. I think 1803. Thomas Jefferson, Louisiana Purchase. We pick it up because he doesn't want it anymore. Quebec, he had to surrender Quebec to the Brits after 7 Years' War. I think that's right. After the 7 Years' War. After the 7 Years' War. Oh gosh, 7 Years' War. 1759 to 17. Hold on. The French Indian War. 7 Years' War. Hold on. It was 1754 to 1763. 7 Years' War. After that, they surrendered Quebec to the Brits. But yeah, that's how they related. They were all former French colonies. So I guess they're related in that regard. That's the issue. Thank you. 1756, 1763. There we go. Yes. I don't always remember all of them. So I try to go through my memories. I can remember things. I do sometimes forget the specifics. Is why I was very generic in my dates. I don't remember every date of all the things I talked about. I know the time frame, right? I know about when they were happening at the same time. So that's why I say that. I don't want to. I'd have to spend 5 years checking thing every 5 seconds if I did that. So that's why I don't do that. So yes. All righty. Guys, I'm going to ask one thing as I always do. Do me a favor, guys. Click the button known as like. A lot of you aren't doing it. It does matter. I'm hoping you're enjoying this. I did it on purpose because you asked me for this kind of show. I hope it's valuable to you. I hope it's fun and interesting. You see how culture started a long time ago and it still keeps going. This is why we think the way we think. Things that are happening now, we got to work on now. Please repost this, reshare this. It does matter. Please subscribe on my YouTube page. If you haven't, please do so. If you have in the past, do it again. YouTube will unsubscribe you just cause. Follow me on both X and Facebook. I'm going to ask you one more thing now, if you could. This is specific. When this is over, I want you to please put in the comment the most important thing in history you think happened. Your view. What do you think is the most important? And I'll respond. I will give you a response to whatever you think. What was the most important thing that happened in human history that you think is important, that affects us to this day? Guys, I'm let you all run. I spent almost 3 hours. I appreciate it. And Ryan says, click like if you approve of King Leopold. And even if you don't, doesn't matter. I will let you guys all run. I will be back on tomorrow at 7 p.m. I will see you all